He was treated as nothing more than a hopeless loser, someone without the slightest hint of talent. Just when he had given up completely and was about to bring disaster upon himself, a mysterious power awakened the system of explosive growth. This ability allowed him to improve 10 times faster than any ordinary person. Yet before this turning point, the world had already fallen to ruin, invaded by monsters 30 years earlier. In the present day, a bottle of liquor shatters against the ground as a man vents his frustration, complaining bitterly about yet another dungeon portal opening. The same drunk who tossed the bottle then kicks a railing in anger, ranting about both the hunters and the system itself. Before he can go further, a guard intervenes to stop him. The guards attempt to calm him down and persuade him to climb back safely, but he refuses, shouting at them to leave him alone. He cries out that no one could possibly understand the pain he's endured after everything that has happened. Just 3 hours earlier, inside a towering building belonging to the Bixian Guild, the same young man was angrily shouting, demanding to know if he had truly been fired. He questioned if the guild even realized how much of his life he had devoted to serving them. Sitting across from him, a man at the desk asked coldly what he had actually achieved, claiming he was little more than a pack mule. He had been hired 7 years ago simply for appearing hardworking, yet in all that time he had accomplished almost nothing. The protagonist tried to argue back, but the guild leader cut him off and ordered him to leave, promising that his severance would be calculated. Desperate, he pleaded that he could heal his injured leg and continue working. At that moment, a tattooed, muscular blonde man barged in, sneering down at him. The protagonist recognized him instantly as Li Yongjin and demanded to know how he could treat his senior so disrespectfully. But Yongjin mocked him without restraint, calling him pathetic for clinging on like an old man and suggesting he take the severance pay to buy snacks, since that was all a washed-up D-rank like him was good for. Enraged, Tijin grabbed Yongjin by the shirt. He shouted that his leg injury was all Yongjin's fault, caused by his reckless behavior during an earlier battle. Yongjin only scoffed, asking when Tijin had ever been asked to save him in the first place. He accused Tijin of failing to know his place and ridiculed him, questioning how a useless man like him could ever awaken an S-rank skill. Sneering at Tijin's ability, explosive growth, he dismissed it as a laughable gimmick, joking that maybe Tijin's growth plates had simply broken. Yongjin's mockery was punctuated when Tijin lashed out, only to have his strike blocked by a small barrier that formed around Yongjin's hand. Yongjin warned him to stay in his place, before slamming a brutal punch directly into Tijin's stomach, knocking him down in pain and leaving him sprawled across the floor. Seizing Tijin by the collar, Yongjin growled that he was sick of Tijin pretending to be superior just because he had joined the guild a few years earlier, declaring this the perfect chance to prove how weak he really was. Yongjin then pummeled his face with a flurry of punches. All the while, the guild leader coldly accused Tijin of committing a crime, a D-rank daring to challenge a C-rank. Finally, Yongjin released him, dropping Tijin's battered body onto the floor. An envelope stuffed with cash landed beside him as the guild leader thanked Tijin for years of driving him around, but declared that they would never meet again. Just then, something impossible appeared, a glowing system window. Tijin struck at the window in frustration, blaming everything on the worthless skill he had been given. He cursed endlessly that his ability never raised a single stat, ordering the window to vanish and hurling a bottle at it, shattering glass. His voice broke as he screamed to the heavens, begging God to end this nightmare and asking why his life had become so miserable. Suddenly, the status window began to glitch, its frame flickering with static. A moment later, it responded to him, stating that his complaint had been received. Back in the present, Tijin stood on the edge, arguing with authorities as they pleaded with him to step away. But as he fell, the system reappeared, notifying him that the administrator had received his complaint and would transfer him to the administrator's server temporarily. For a brief moment, he promised himself that perhaps this was his last chance. Yet he dismissed the thought, assuming it was nothing more than his imagination. Either way, he was now jobless, left to wonder how he could possibly survive. With no guild willing to hire him, he even considered taking up day labor to get by. As he mulled over his bleak options, a hologram suddenly appeared, a blonde, pointy-eared girl asking if he was satisfied with the latest status window update. Startled, Tijin stumbled backward, shouting in shock and demanding to know who she was. Calmly, she introduced herself as Miri, a representative from the Status Window Management Department. Tijin asked in disbelief if any of this could possibly be real. Miri explained that after reviewing his complaint about explosive growth, they discovered his status window had been outdated, causing a malfunction. Tijin stood stunned, unable to comprehend the revelation, and Miri's lighthearted laugh at the end only made it harder for him to accept. She added that the exact reasons could not be disclosed due to security restrictions, but assured him the problem was now fixed. His status window was finally restored, and he would now begin evolving as originally intended. Instead of relief, Tijin's rage only deepened. He turned on her, shouting that every year of effort had been wasted. All of his blood, sweat, and training for 7 long years had been ruined by a faulty system. Shaken, Miri tried to calm him as he seized her by the shoulders. His face twisted in fury as he demanded to know how she planned to repay him for 7 stolen years, even threatening her life. Terrified, Miri begged him to relax, assuring him that she had restored all the attributes he should have gained and even healed his injured body. Tijin released her and tested his leg, moving it experimentally. To his amazement, the pain was gone, his leg was perfectly healed. Shocked, he asked how she had done it. Miri responded by proposing a challenge. The scene shifted to the city center, where ominous green energy swirled in the sky. Miri encouraged him confidently, assuring him that she believed in his abilities and adding, almost casually, that at worst he would only die. While flashing him a thumbs up, Miri directed his attention to the creature before them, which bloomed open like a monstrous flower releasing venomous spores. Such a threat would normally require at least a B-rank hunter to defeat. Still uncertain, Tijin asked if defeating it would truly trigger explosive growth as promised, and Miri confirmed without hesitation. Her sudden appearance and outrageous claims left him reeling in disbelief. Yet as the monster lunged forward, he steeled himself. Tijin retaliated with a powerful kick that tore through one of its massive appendages. As new notifications filled his vision, another message suddenly appeared. His status window revealed that, despite everything, he was still only rank D. With a knowing smile, Miri asked how it felt to finally use explosive growth. Tijin could only answer that the power felt absurdly overwhelming. But Miri warned him not to celebrate yet, explaining that the skill's true potential was only beginning to awaken. To unlock it fully, he would need to defeat every monster before them. As she spoke, the battlefield grew tense. Tijin charged forward with renewed determination, exhilaration burning through him as he prepared to strike. One after another, he cut down the 5 remaining spore creatures, growing stronger each time. At last, he launched himself toward the main spore, realizing that if this continued, he might even surpass his current rank. With a fierce grin, he plunged straight into its maw, readying his punch. The scene shifted again to a fully restored cityscape. Among the survivors, Yanjin grumbled bitterly about having missed the battle. One of his companions pointed out Tijin rummaging through the remains of the defeated creature. They whispered in disbelief, wondering how someone like him was even there, suspicious of his strangely smug expression. Yanjin and his group soon approached, taunting Tijin and even mocking Miri, sneering that Tijin still hadn't grasped the hint they'd given him earlier. Yanjin spat insults, insisting Tijin would never be anything but a loser. Tijin only paused for a moment, before smirking slyly and sarcastically thanking Yanjin for the delay caused by his injured leg, claiming he owed his survival to that kindness. Then, in front of the soldiers, he modestly insisted that it was nothing more than his duty as a hunter. His unexpected composure left Yanjin and his gang visibly shaken and confused. Miri was about to speak further when Yanjin interrupted, incredulous that Tijin alone could have defeated the monster. Still in shock, Yanjin struggled to process the truth. Tijin cut him off, curtly telling him not to interfere with the officials, then grabbed Yanjin and his group to drag them away, promising explanations later. Time moved forward as they regrouped. The blonde thug sneered again, demanding if the protagonist had truly slain the monster by himself. He continued mocking, pointing out Tijin's D rank and pressing him to admit the truth, ordering him to respond. They stared at him in confusion, while Tijin calmly stated that perhaps they were simply mistaken. He admitted that he was inexperienced in explaining things, unable to properly sugarcoat his words. Then, with sharp finality, he declared that those who commit crimes must be punished, punctuating the statement by striking Tijin's head downward. The protagonist calmly asks if his opponent is truly serious about what he just said. Then he declares that since the bald man insists on punishment, he should accept it fully, just as he deserves. Tijin follows through with a punch straight to his face. The impact is so overwhelming that it metaphorically reboots the man's system, leaving him sprawled helplessly on the floor. The rest of the group watches in disbelief, questioning their eyes as the bald man collapses alone. Tijin, unimpressed, challenges them further. If they dared intimidate a superior, he would test if they could withstand even a single flick to the forehead. As they approach, Tijin gathers power in his finger and delivers a flick so strong that the bald man's face distorts, his nose bursting blood like a fountain. Then Tijin proceeds to dismantle the rest of the group, flick by flick. Shields shatter, weapons are knocked away, and several members are sent flying unconscious. By the end, only Yanjin remains standing, furious and bewildered, demanding if this is some sort of joke. He cannot believe his team could fall to attacks like that, but Tijin firmly responds that it is no joke. With Yongjin visibly disoriented, Tijin adds that while he may spare the others, Yongjin himself will not escape. He explains that for someone like Yongjin, a simple flick is not nearly enough, and warns him to brace himself. Enraged beyond reason, Yongjin shouts that he will kill Tijin. He conjures sharp ice spikes while mocking Tijin, sneering that it looks like he has only unlocked some minor physical skill. Tijin grins and thanks the status window for its perfect timing. Before Yongjin can react, his ice spikes melt instantly under the blazing heat of a massive fireball, leaving him in shock, unsure if it's even real. The enormous sphere of flames swallows Yongjin completely. His mind reels, overwhelmed by unbearable heat. His body dries out, his clothes char, and his hair splits and burns to ash. Barely conscious, the blonde man wonders what has just happened and why he is still alive. Tijin mocks him, pointing out that he even wet his pants, ridiculing him for collapsing in such a pathetic state. Stepping closer, Tijin warns him to stop tormenting guild members and orders him to behave himself from now on. Yongjin immediately grovels, apologizing profusely and calling Tijin senior, promising never to bully anyone again. Miri appears beside the protagonist, shaking him awake and telling him it's time to head into the dungeon. Breaking the fourth wall, Tijin groans at her to shut up, complaining of pain and fever while asking her to be quiet. She realizes he has finally regained consciousness, as he explains that he pushed his mana to its absolute limit, suffering from his own recklessness. He admits he was too excited about his sudden strength, but now he must focus on improving his mana. Miri questions whether he really needs that, considering how much he has already grown. He insists that it is exactly because of his rapid growth that he must increase his mana capacity. He further explains that his fireball consumes twice as much mana as normal, making it essential to boost his reserves. Miri nods in understanding and asks if there is a way to raise only mana. He replies that there is a perfect place for that, just as the status window reappears. The next day, an enormous tower rising into the clouds comes into view. Training Tower. Miri frowns, puzzled, asking why such a well-known place is completely empty if it's so effective. Tijin explains that it was once popular but has long since fallen out of fashion. This leaves Miri confused, while Tijin silently wonders what is truly happening to him. Approaching the gate, Tijin announces he wants to take the tower's training mission, but the old gatekeeper mishears, thinking he mentioned fast food, and rambles toward his grandmother. The protagonist quickly clarifies that he's asking for the mission, not food. The old man laughs it off and tells him to follow, offering to guide them through the tower. Nervously, Miri whispers that this feels unsettling, but Tijin reassures her that he's ready. As the guildman begins explaining the tower, Tijin interrupts him, confidently stating that the tower is divided into 10 stages, and clearing them all will complete the mission. He adds that the first stage requires defeating a group of goblins. Tijin explains that although he could never join expeditions due to his leg, he had memorized the strategies better than anyone else. He concludes that this beginner dungeon will be nothing for him. Miri praises him, while the narration notes that Tijin is indeed a master of theory. The old man asks what he just said, but Tijin brushes it off, pretending he was only talking to himself. Miri comments that 10 goblins should be easy for him. 3 small goblins appear, but behind them emerges a massive horde of much larger ones. Tijin stares in disbelief, muttering if it's supposed to be bulking season. He asks the old man why the goblins resemble ogres. The old man only mutters nonsense about kimchi soup. Frustrated, Tijin shouts in exasperation. Without warning, the massive horde of ogres charges. Miri urgently asks Tijin what he plans to do. Clenching his fist, Tijin summons his fireball magic and hurls it at the monsters. As he cheers, watching them burn, Miri warns that more enemies remain and urges him to be careful. He blocks the next attack, countering with his staff for leverage. The status window appears, notifying him that the first stage has been perfectly cleared, thanks to explosive growth. The old man laughs heartily, congratulating Tijin for clearing the first floor so fast. Tijin, suppressing his anger, insists it wasn't easy at all, it was far harder than expected. The old man ignores his frustration and orders them onward, only making Tijin more irritated and tempted to strike him. The reason becomes clear: this tower is considered impossible for beginners. Before them looms the final boss, a monstrous 3-headed hound bound by golden chains, its fur glowing red. Tijin recalls his time in the forest, when he once dismissed hellhounds as nothing more than mean dogs. But this creature was on an entirely different level. He mutters that they should abandon the reward, admitting he couldn't defeat it even if he died and returned again. However, he suddenly remembers hidden missions. He realizes that the entire tower is constructed from the old man's mana. Because the old man cannot control it, the monsters are running wild. If he could restore the old man, the dungeon could be cleared. Miri asks if he has a plan, and he replies that he does, though he's uncertain it will work. He runs straight toward the old man, recalling advice about powerful mages losing control of their mana. Tejan dashes behind the old man, while Miri shouts frantically, asking what he's doing. Grabbing the old man's head, he begins massaging it firmly. The old man relaxes into a trance-like state. Tejan knows it looks like a mere massage, but in truth, he is redirecting scattered mana back into proper flow within the old man's mind. He steels himself, determined to restore balance. With a chuckle, he calls the old man Hunim, as the frail figure suddenly transforms, muscles bulging, staff enlarging. Tejan asks who he has become. The old man replies that it has been ages since his mind was this clear. Before more can be said, the massive hellhound lunges to strike. With a single swing, the old man tears through the beast and blasts apart the top of the tower. Moments later, the old man is casually doing squats with his staff balanced on his shoulders. He then shows off bodybuilding poses, boasting that this is what makes him an archmage. He introduces himself as Archmage Elkaroid, flexing and asking if Tejan can feel the mana radiating from his muscles, inviting him to touch. Tejan refuses flatly, saying there's no need. He instead asks Elkaroid to help increase his own mana reserves. Elkaroid agrees easily, mentioning his special body mana technique. He coughs mid-sentence, joking that he almost died from that strain. He explains that Tejan's Fireball consumes far too much mana when cast. Even though Fireball is a basic ability, his reserves drain rapidly. But Elkaroid reassures him not to worry, he will help him rebuild and perfect his Fireball. Later in the city, the scene shifts to a large building. A voice calls out for Tejan, a red-haired girl appears. She is Sienna, a rank hunter from the Myth Guild. Impressed, Miri asks if Tejan really knows her, and he admits she's just an old friend from the Hunter Training Academy. Even more surprised, Miri teases him, asking if he truly has friends. Her words irritate him, and he asks if he really looks that pathetic to her. She brushes it off and asks why Sienna called him. Tejan replies that he invited her to test the new Fireball technique he learned from the old man, explaining that the Myth Guild owns part of the facility. Myth possesses the largest training center in the entire country. She acknowledges the situation, remarking that he seems to have far more connections than she ever imagined. Curious, she steps closer and asks what he had just said. He quickly laughs it off, claiming he hadn't spoken at all. But she closes the distance even further, pressing him again if that was really true. Startled, he asks if there's something on his face that made her lean in so close. With a steady gaze, she replies that she only wanted to see how much he had changed. The timing feels odd, but she notes that someone else had also reserved the training center today. She teases him, saying he'll be surprised by who it is. The protagonist turns his head in shock. It's none other than Jinyuk, a rank A hunter and proud member of the Bikshan Guild. Their eyes lock, with the protagonist visibly unsettled, while Jinyuk glares back with fury. The scene shifts forward, where she explains that the training ground is actually a virtual space generated from the user's mana. The strength of the monsters that appear directly depends on the amount of mana infused. To demonstrate, she channels mana into her hand and summons a small, pitiful rat, something so ugly even demons might pity it. Yet she calls it adorable and asks if he understands. The protagonist hesitates, lost in thought. Meanwhile, Sienna casually mentions that she'll go fetch some drinks. Alone, the protagonist extends his hand, testing the space, and realizes he can create any monster he wants using mana. To his surprise, the experiment works. Instantly, he conjures a fierce assault, slicing an ogre cleanly in half. He stretches afterward as if it were nothing more than a warm-up. He admits that at first, he couldn't believe what he was seeing, quietly wondering if this meant he had unlocked some sort of new power. His thoughts drift to the few real friends he had back in the Hunter Training Institute. The ones who stood by him even when he retaliated against rookies who tried to mess with him first. But Choi Jinyuk suddenly loses his temper, seizing the protagonist by the collar and warning that he's far too cocky. The protagonist cuts him off, wheezing that he's choking and finding it hard to breathe. Since he feels threatened, he declares this would count as self-defense. Just then, Sienna walks back in carrying a bag, announcing she brought drinks for him. She stops in shock at the sight of Tejan and Jinyuk locked in a scuffle, demanding to know what they're doing. Choi Jinyuk slams the protagonist down with a powerful thrust, growling for a break. But the protagonist refuses, stating firmly that there will be no rest. In the next instant, he surprises Jinyuk with a sharp kick. Jinyuk barely manages to defend himself, admitting through clenched teeth that Tejan has indeed grown stronger. He vows to stop holding back and fight seriously now. Yet the protagonist smirks, mocking that he should have been serious from the start. This only fuels Jinyuk's anger. Annoyed, Jinyuk thinks about when this fool became so skilled at provoking others. He spins his spear and announces his next technique. Sparks fly as golden lightning begins to surround him. It's the Bixian spear technique, first form Spear of Thunder, a weapon wrapped in yellow crackling energy. Sienna screams in disbelief, asking if Jinyuk has completely lost his mind by unleashing a thunder spear inside the training center. But the protagonist, who already anticipated Jinyuk would resort to this move, simply braces himself, while Miri beside him trembles in fear. Both Sienna and Miri watch in horror as he prepares his counter. And the reckless man charges straight in. What he unleashes is not an ordinary spell, but the fireball of an archmage, a devastating blast that also carries a healing reduction effect on its target. Jinyuk freezes, stunned at what he's seeing, questioning if this is truly a beam of pure energy. He curses the overwhelming magic, admitting he can't block it, but suddenly someone steps between them. Everyone is left speechless. The protagonist blurts out asking who this man is, and Sienna shouts that it's the vice president of the Myth Guild. Sehyun, a Rangkes hunter of incredible renown. He declares that this fireball is no ordinary attack, warning that using such power against an ally could have caused a disaster. His words drive the warning home. It could have ended in tragedy. The protagonist only shrugs, saying he's drained of energy since it was his first time casting it. Jinyuk, still catching his breath, thinks to himself that while the situation was chaotic, it worked out in his favor, especially since Taejin nearly got into serious trouble. Sehyun, exuding an oppressive aura, now fixes his gaze on the protagonist and calls him forward. With a calm smile, he extends his hand, asking if Taejin would like to join his guild. One of the few Rangkes hunters in the entire nation is extending a direct invitation to Taejin himself. Sehyun explains that never before has he seen a fireball wielded with such force, and anyone who could elevate a basic skill to its maximum potential would be invaluable to their guild. He repeats his question, would Taejin join them? The protagonist smiles inwardly, realizing that being scouted like this meant he had finally been recognized. After all, Myth was one of the 4 largest guilds in all of Korea. The big 4 were Hanmik, Myth, Lamwon, and Chinyin. Joining one would guarantee overwhelming benefits. Taejin answers Sehyun directly, saying that hunters must always train beyond their limits. His conviction even makes Sehyun question what kind of training he refers to. Taejin clarifies that he made a promise to push himself to the absolute edge, testing his own boundaries. He recalls that during his sparring against Hunter Jinyuk, he realized there are still countless mountains he cannot yet overcome. Because of this, he explains, he cannot accept the guild offer, as he still has far too many challenges ahead. Jinyuk calls him insane and tries to interrupt the exchange. But Sehyun only laughs, praising Taejin's spirit, saying that nothing is more important for a hunter than endless training. He then asks for his name and rank. The protagonist introduces himself, Lee Taejin, a rank D hunter. Sehyun remarks that such talent being stuck at rank D is an absolute waste, and promises to personally support his growth. Time skips forward. Taejin explains that Sehyun provided him with a letter of recommendation to attempt the rank B evaluation in 1 month. At first, he was hesitant, but higher-ranked hunters gain access to higher-level dungeons. A month later, the scene shifts to the Hunter Test Center. Taejin is struck by the intimidating yet awe-inspiring atmosphere of the facility. At his side, Miri comments that Sehyun must really see potential in him, considering how quickly he offered the recommendation letter. Taejin brags that talent recognizes talent, and no one could ever compare to him. Miri asks the burning question, why didn't he just join Myth, given all the advantages? He answers that logically, the reason is money. Guild hunters must hand over a share of their raid profits to the guild. On top of that, the rewards aren't as lucrative, and schedules become suffocating. You just work like a disposable tool, only to be thrown aside once injured. He concludes that all he truly wants is money, nothing else. As he speaks with a twisted grin, someone suddenly calls his name, making him turn with only part of his body, his expression almost devilish. It's a girl with silver hair and a cat ear headband, asking if he too is here for the test. This is Irin, a rank C hunter from the Chinyin Guild. She extends her hand and he shakes it, asking if she already knew him. She nods, saying rumors about him had spread quickly. Taejin recalls that Sehyun seems absolutely determined to recruit him into Myth. But Irin smirks mischievously, teasing that she's heard even the vice president of Myth has been keeping a very close eye on him. Taejin curses inwardly, realizing she's talking far too much. Suddenly, another man interrupts, claiming he came to observe but instead found himself disappointed to see only a mediocre hunter, referring directly to Taejin. He sneers, saying this should serve as proof that nothing good comes from shallow hype. Introducing himself proudly, he declares that it's a pleasure to meet them, because he is destined to become the greatest hunter of this entire era. Tejan stares, thinking to himself that the man is completely insane. Just then, the attention of every hunter shifts toward the woman on stage. She announces that it's time to introduce their mentor for the test. A Ranke hunter, none other than Choi Jin-hyuk of the Bikshan Guild. The protagonist is impressed as Choi Jin-hyuk takes the microphone. He greets the room, saying it's good to see everyone. He then warns them that before the evaluation begins, he will briefly explain the rules. The test will be held inside a dungeon they have prepared, where the 8 participants will be divided into pairs. Each pair will face the dungeon together. The dungeon has 4 entrances labeled A, B, C, and D. The first team to reach the end will directly face the boss alongside him. He adds that even if serious injuries occur, support teams will be on standby. He ends by stressing that a scoring system will be in place and that they must all keep it in mind. Once the explanation is finished, he instructs that if anyone's name is called, they must step forward, collect their streaming gear, and proceed into the portal. Team A is revealed to be Usirin and Kang Jian. Team B is composed of Yang Dongjun and Hong Orium. Team C consists of Cho Songyi and Bael Junhyan. The TMD team is revealed to consist of Lee Taejin and Kim Junhyan. They are assigned to their designated routes, and our protagonist casually greets the towering member of his group, surprised to see him there as well. Junhyan replies that it feels reassuring to be working alongside his senior. This man is Kim Junhyan, a rank C adventurer from the Bikshan Guild. The two step into the portal, all while being quietly monitored by Choi Jin-hyuk. Choi Jin-hyuk believes that Taejin will eventually regret trying to exploit him for personal gain. In his mind, he issues a silent warning, thinking that things will not go as smoothly as Taejin expects. His expression hardens, clearly showing his disdain toward Taejin. A flashback takes us to the Bikshan Guild, where Choi Jin-hyuk asks Junhyan if he's listening carefully. He warns that Junhyan's only role is to join the rank B evaluation and sabotage Taejin's progress. He even promises a handsome reward once the mission is carried out successfully. Returning to the present, Junhyan reflects on how he ended up traveling Route D with Taejin. The protagonist points at several white snakes, identifying them as monsters, before swiftly crushing one with a single punch. He questions why these creatures are so feeble and why they provide such little experience. Junhyan, meanwhile, is baffled by Taejin's overwhelming strength, noticing that his explosive growth ability is active, yet offers only minimal experience gain. Back in the past at the Bikshan Guild, both of them occupied the lowest ranks, yet Taejin never lost his fighting spirit. Their earlier conversation resurfaces. Taejin admired Junhyan's skill to absorb enemy attacks, affirming that such talent would surely shine someday as long as he persevered. In return, Junhyan once called Taejin a remarkable senior. To him, Taejin was the one who gave him hope when he had none. But now, his current mission is to ensure Taejin's downfall. He can't help but feel that this kind of betrayal is the act of scum, yet he sees no alternative. His mother's surgery depends on the reward, and for his family's sake, he must go through with it. He approaches Taejin, calling out, and hands him a small vial, insisting that the journey will be tough and he should at least take it. He explains that it's a buff potion he always carries during expeditions, encouraging Taejin to use it. Taejin accepts with gratitude and drinks it, unaware that Junhyan is secretly relieved, believing the protagonist has just ingested a paralysis poison that will gradually weaken him. But right as Junhyan concludes his thoughts, Taejin suddenly clutches his stomach in pain. He groans that some devil inside him is awakening and frantically asks for a bathroom. Junhyan answers that no such facility exists here, and Taejin mutters that their only choice is to clear the dungeon quickly. Meanwhile, Junhyan begins to wonder if Taejin possesses some kind of resistance. Later, as they advance deeper, the protagonist notices a massive chasm blocking their path, calling it a dead end because of the sheer depth. He suggests turning back, though the dungeon's design makes it feel like they've been walking in circles. Junhyan's eyes fix on Taejin's back, realizing this might be his chance. If he pushes Taejin into the abyss, he wouldn't die outright, but it could ruin his evaluation. However, his attempt fails. As Taejin nearly slips, he grabs Junhyan's leg desperately, yelling if he's trying to kill him by throwing himself off the cliff. Taejin demands an explanation, and Junhyan admits that he tried to sabotage him, confessing he only wanted to make him fail the test. He concludes by begging Taejin to just let a useless person like him fall. Taejin tells him this isn't the time for that conversation, while internally panicking because the stomach pain has grown severe. He even wonders if he can relieve himself nearby since no one is currently watching his live stream. But when he looks around, he realizes 10 viewers are still observing. Embarrassed, he decides to pull Junhyan up instead. Yet the ground beneath them crumbles, sending them both plummeting to the bottom of the pit. From the darkness below, countless serpents emerge. They immediately begin slithering toward the two. Meanwhile, the perspective shifts to the other teams. Team B is barely hanging on, completely drained, while the observer wonders aloud if they can survive. Hong Aru suddenly breaks down, screaming for her mother and begging to quit. With her surrender, Team B is eliminated, leaving poor Yang Dongjun behind, crying out for help. Over at Team C, the members are caught up in infighting, nearly leading to their own downfall. Finally, the focus moves to Team A. The observer questions their chances as Rin turns to the camera. She declares confidently that they will be the ones to slay the 1,000-year-old white snakes. The moment she announces her readiness, she notices Kang Jie-Chuan recklessly charging straight at the beasts. He shouts wildly, almost incoherently, like a warrior invoking his spirit. Rin is startled at his recklessness, while Kang proudly states that this test will get him noticed by his superiors. He insists that he won't let such an opportunity slip away. Rin complains that he's only trying to hog the spotlight. Determined, she refuses to let him take all the credit. With fiery resolve, she declares that she won't play a side character. This time, she'll be the protagonist of the trial. Team A rises to the challenge, displaying the potential worthy of the four great guilds. They become the first to reach the boss chamber, where they are greeted by Choi Jin-hyuk. He congratulates them for making it and states that he will guide them to the boss. Rin asks whether Taejin has arrived yet. Choi Jin-hyuk replies that since Team D has no livestream, they were probably eliminated. Kang scoffs, saying he knew Taejin wasn't much, but Rin admits she expected more, given the direct recommendation from Sehyun. Choi Jin-hyuk then instructs them to follow him into the boss room. Inside, Choi Jin-hyuk contemplates how disappointed Sehyun would be upon hearing this. But the entire group freezes at the sight of a colossal serpent. Its body is pierced through by enormous spikes. A gigantic skeleton sits enthroned nearby. Its hollow eyes glare at them, uttering incomprehensible words. The team wonders in horror what exactly they are facing. The scene cuts back to Team D, where Jun Hyun's unique ability is explained. It manifests into a new skill called Hell Train, launching both of them upward with a cannon-like blast of blue flames erupting from Jun Hyun's body. Riding on Jun Hyun's shoulders, the protagonist asks if he can endure more, to which Jun Hyun nods firmly. Taejin then points upward, ordering him to head straight for the boss chamber. The narrative shifts back to Team A, where Choi Jin-hyuk recalls that the dungeon boss was originally supposed to be a serpent named Mugi. However, Mugi is dead and standing before them is a lick. Choi Jin-hyuk instantly suspects that someone must have interfered with the dungeon. Rin panics, screaming in disbelief at the presence of a lick in this zone. The massive dead serpent suddenly begins to rise as Choi Jin-hyuk orders everyone to retreat behind him. In that instant, the serpent lashes out violently. It grabs Choi Jin-hyuk, forcing the team members into shock. They realize they can't just watch and rush forward. Together, they strike at the beast. But the serpent retaliates, hurling icy spikes toward them. Just as Choi Jin-hyuk considers that the only way to stop this might be to kill the lick itself. He charges at the lick's back, only to be caught by the serpent's tail, pinned down and immobilized. Cursing his carelessness, he wonders if this is really the end, dying here without even leaving final words for Sina. But before the serpent can finish him off, two clumsy figures crash in. With the power of Hell Train, they slam into the serpent's head, leaving Choi Jin-hyuk stunned at their arrival. Taejin and Jun Hyun cheer, celebrating their dramatic entrance into the boss chamber, while Choi Jin-hyuk simply feels relieved to still be alive. Yet he quickly refocuses, realizing survival is not the priority right now. He urgently calls out to them, warning to keep away from the serpent. Dodging another deadly strike, the protagonist questions whether a lick and serpent together isn't far too much for a rank B trial. He suspects that perhaps someone deliberately arranged this to cause failure. Still, he asks if all they need to do is defeat both creatures. The others agree it's the only option. Choi Jin-hyuk shouts for caution as he channels his power. He unleashes another blazing fire strike, blasting through the spikes and slamming into the serpent's skull. At last, Choi Jin-hyuk thrusts his spear forward, activating the second form of the divine spear technique. With her teammates' help, Rin channels freezing energy into Kang's hands. Empowered, Kang charges straight toward the seemingly unguarded lick. Kang doesn't let the chance slip. His punch lands directly, piercing into the lick's body. At the same time, the Hell Train slams into the lick once again. For a brief moment, everyone celebrates, thinking the creature has finally been defeated, its form locked in ice. But their joy quickly fades as the lick restores itself, returning to normal as though nothing happened. It begins muttering incomprehensible incantations. From the ground, skeletal spikes suddenly shoot upward. The jagged bones stab into their bodies from all directions. Everyone suffers injuries from the sudden strike, and Taejin realizes that while the lick is powerful, it shouldn't be completely immune to damage. He wonders what crucial piece of knowledge about liches he might be missing. Just then Miri's voice echoes in his mind, asking if he's forgotten her, reminding him how difficult it was to install the app and hack it. From here on, she declares, they'll use the map itself as their primary weapon. She urges him to hack into the map and use it during combat. He snaps back, demanding what she's talking about. She never mentioned this before. But his status window suddenly pops up, showing the dungeon mapping system loading. It begins acquiring monster data, structural details, and environmental information to generate a map. Once the process finishes, a mental hologram materializes before him, announcing that partial navigation has been activated. Tejan asks Miri what partial navigation even means. She explains that by using it, he can uncover vital dungeon data, including enemy abilities, hidden paths, and rewards. In short, it's a powerful tool to study dungeons thoroughly. She also reveals that she has installed additional apps he can use actively in combat. Tejan realizes this isn't merely a hack for information but a complete support system, loaded with invaluable functions. He quickly confirms that the original boss should have been the B-class Amugi, and questions where this lick even came from. As he locks eyes with the lick, it suddenly begins making bizarre sounds. Words he can shockingly understand, the lick declares that Eridus is pleased. Tejan shudders, unnerved by how disturbing this is. He asks Miri what's going on, and she insists it must be a glitch. But before she can elaborate, Eridus speaks again, thanking his contractor for providing such fresh, strong humans. Tejan thinks it odd this doesn't feel like a bug, and if a contractor is involved. He asks Choi Jin-yuk if he can still move. When Jin confirms he narrowly avoided a fatal blow, Tejan insists that, whether they believe him or not, he has discovered the lick's weakness. There's no time to explain, but they must trust him. A tense silence follows until Choi Jin-yuk finally asks what they should do. Tejan answers simply, first they have to irritate the lick. Without hesitation, he begins leaping around, mocking the lick by calling him a skeleton. He taunts further, asking why it isn't attacking, sneering if its brain has frozen, while pulling silly faces and sticking out his tongue. The lick bristles with rage, demanding if Tejan is so eager to die sooner. It slams its staff against the ground, vowing to bring everyone to ruin. But thanks to his navigation system, Tejan can now see warning indicators of where bone spikes will erupt. He orders everyone to gather close to him. They barely manage to dodge the deadly assault. Smiling, Tejan confirms that the system works exactly as Miri described. He can now track attack paths, and with that knowledge their plan becomes viable. He keeps provoking the lick, laughing at its constant misses. With sarcasm, he praises the lick's legendary accuracy. Enraged beyond reason, the lick unleashes a barrage of flaming skulls. Tejan seizes the moment. He coordinates his allies, ordering Choi Jin-yuk 3 steps to the side and Jun Hyun 5 steps back. Both narrowly evade attacks that would have otherwise killed them. Choi Jin-yuk is astonished by Tejan's precision, grudgingly praising his leadership. But then the entire area begins to quake as dark energy fills the room. The lick prepares an even greater spell. This time Tejan notices warning markers scattered everywhere. It's an attack that can't be dodged. His allies panic, asking how they're supposed to avoid it. Tejan quickly deduces that the strike covers an enormous area. Eridus then announces his ability, Requiem of Death, a devastating spell of mass destruction. But to the lick's shock, Tejan yells for his team to move, and 3 figures leap from the smoke. Choi Jin-yuk, Kang Jae-chuan, and Seirin emerge, battered but alive. Tejan shouts that the lick's abilities are now on cooldown. Without wasting time, he commands Seirin to launch her attack. She responds by unleashing a freezing wind directly at the lick. The icy blast locks its movements in place. Yet Eridus laughs, applauding their effort but warning them that their attacks cannot truly harm him. Aware of this, Tejan instructs his allies to simply restrain the lick while he rushes to its back. The skeleton glares at him suspiciously, unsure of his intentions. But then panic flickers in its hollow eyes. As Tejan runs, he recalls that contract summoned liches gain near immortality by feeding on sacrifices. And they can only be undone by destroying the offering that sustains them. His eyes lock onto a box sealed with runes. He declares that if he smashes it, the summoning will be undone. The lick roars in fury, realizing his secret is exposed. He howls, demanding how they dare deceive him. Breaking free from the ice, he charges Tejan, chanting violent incantations while swinging his staff. Just before he can land a fatal blow, Choi Jin-yuk and the others strike from behind. Jun Hyun hurls himself onto the lick, grappling him down. Their spears pin its body to the ground. They shout that the lick is restrained, urging Tejan to finish the task. He nods, thanking them, and prepares a powerful punch, ordering the lick to stay down. His strike shatters part of the wall. Behind it lies a hidden chest, which Tejan lunges at like a madman. The lick thrashes under the group's restraint, reaching for its staff, while Choi Jin-hyuk wonders if Taejin truly found the weakness and if the offering was really hidden here. None of them notice Eridus secretly casting another spell, struggling to rise again. The lick curses, insisting it's impossible, only he and his contractor should know about the offering. Choi Jin-hyuk keeps striking, desperately trying to hold the lick down. But his efforts fail as the lick surges forward toward Taejin. Meanwhile, Taejin, clutching the box, warns the lick that if it keeps resisting, he'll destroy the box without hesitation, smiling manically. The lick looms before him, asking if he can truly understand the ancient language. Ignoring the question, Taejin calmly states that listening to him could save its life. Eridus laughs scornfully, proclaiming that as a contracted being, he can obey no order except from his master. Taejin coldly replies that in that case, they'll just cancel the contract altogether. The lick scoffs, saying that perhaps an ancient mage could achieve such a feat, but someone like Taejin never could. Taejin challenges him, asking if he truly looks like an ordinary human. The lick falters, realizing Taejin not only uncovered his magic, but also located the offering. Doubt creeps in, could Taejin actually break the contract? Eridus finally concedes, saying he'll believe for now. With a twisted smile, he asks what Taejin desires, promising to grant it. Taejin pauses, distracted by the agonizing pain in his stomach once again. He orders the lick to first undo the skeleton army outside. He reminds him that before entering, he had summoned dozens of them. Taejin glances at his partial navigation system, while Eridus demands to know how he discovered it. Outside, the rest of the group is still locked in battle with the skeletons, while Taejin warns that if the lick lies, he'll destroy the offering on the spot. Cornered, the lick begrudgingly complies. Taejin grins with unhinged delight, demanding that the lick hand over everything he has. The skeleton trembles in fear, asking what exactly Taejin means by everything. Taejin tells the lick that by everything, he means its items and accessories, asking if it doesn't have anything worth giving. Eridus insists he has nothing useful, but the sharp-eyed protagonist isn't fooled, pointing at the lick's staff and remarking how interesting it looks. The panicked skeleton clutches the staff, desperately claiming it cannot be taken. Yet he quickly changes his tune when the protagonist raises the offering box and threatens to smash it. The protagonist seizes the staff, while Erodis nervously questions if he truly has the power to sever the contract, saying that if he did, he would be willing to do absolutely anything for him. But the protagonist only stares back with an utterly blank, clueless expression. Finally, he states bluntly that he can't cancel a contract since he doesn't even know summoning magic, advising the lick to choose his words more carefully. Enraged by this humiliation, Eridus roars that he has been deceived. As he charges forward in fury, the protagonist reminds him coldly that he already warned what would happen if he got any closer. He would shatter the offering. Without hesitation, the protagonist hurls the chest onto the ground, instantly causing the lick's body to wither and collapse into disintegration as it lets out bitter curses. Kneeling down, the protagonist picks up a rotting finger from the remains, questioning aloud if this really was the offering. He notes that it must have been important indeed, considering it was enough to summon such a powerful being. Miri asks who could have been behind summoning the lick, but Taejin says it no longer matters since they still gained a valuable bonus. Yet Miri quickly adds that another item remains. She points toward a small arc-like object. Taejin steps forward curious and picks it up to inspect it. Unable to discern its function, he mutters that it must at least be expensive, given it dropped from the lick's remains. Just then, the rest of the team bursts inside, rushing over and asking if he's all right. Without delay, he discreetly hides the staff inside his status window. Jin-hyuk steps forward, demanding to know if he truly managed to defeat the lick alone. The protagonist confirms, stating that the lick appeared and vanished without leaving any trace behind. Though reluctant to admit it, Jin-hyuk acknowledges that the protagonist is undeniably strong, with Siran and Junghyun also agreeing. While the group celebrates, Jin-hyuk moves closer, wanting a private word with him. He confesses that Jun Hyun only acted that way because he had ordered it, apologizing and admitting he isn't even sure why he targeted Taejin in the first place. He admits it might be because he resented the protagonist's relentless effort despite lacking talent, and his refusal to stop pushing forward. The protagonist bursts out mocking him, saying next time he should make it more obvious, since Jun Hyun's clumsy attempts were painfully easy to notice. He laughs even harder, joking that Jin-hyuk must have hit his head to think such petty tricks would work, before dismissing the whole matter and telling him to forget it, suggesting they just celebrate his promotion to Class B with a good meal. The hot-headed Jin-hyuk agrees, asking Taejin what he wants to eat, promising to find a way to get it. Naturally, the protagonist demands perfectly cooked Korean steak. He cuts the conversation short after that. The disgusted look on the protagonist's face afterward was priceless. Bursting out laughing, he points at Jinyuk while the embarrassed hothead blushes, snapping at him to shut up and stop making that stupid face. As the two argue, Yonghyun announces that the gate has finally opened and they can now live. This was especially good news since John was already leading them across the glowing green portal. On the other side, they are greeted by two figures who confirm everyone's safe return and congratulate Taejin on progressing to Class B. Those two were none other than Yane. Alongside her stood a burly, red-haired man with a wild aura, a member of the Whoring Guild, both of them radiating overwhelming presence. Sehyun immediately begins speaking, already aware of the disturbance in the exam, and even drops a JoJo-style reference as she strides forward surrounded by a faint green aura. She notes it was nearly impossible for such a large-scale disruption to happen naturally. The eccentric woman declares confidently that the culprit must be among them. Then, with a sadistic grin, she suddenly accuses Taejin directly of being responsible. Both Irin and Jin are stunned, equally baffled by the accusation. They quickly defend him, explaining that Taejin fought alongside them and supported the entire team during the battle. But Sehyun counters coldly, pointing out that from her perspective, Taejin handled everything by himself. She reveals that the entire fight against the Lick had been broadcast and monitored. Not only did the protagonist guide the others flawlessly through every attack, he even discovered the hidden offering entirely on his own. She presses harder, saying it's far too suspicious for a hunter of his caliber to possess such critical knowledge. As her words spread, the other hunters begin murmuring, questioning if such a thing could really be true. Among them, Sehyun remains the most insistent. Meanwhile, the protagonist is frozen in fear, his expression stiff, realizing he had never anticipated this turn of events. Sehyun demands an answer, warning that if he doesn't respond immediately, she will crush him where he stands. Taejin's fear only deepens, wondering if this lunatic truly intends to kill him on the spot. But he forces himself to stay calm, knowing he must find a way to clear suspicion, since everything indeed looked bad for him. Running through events in his mind, the Lick, the offering, and the mysterious contractor, he forms a desperate plan. At last, he raises his voice, asking everyone to pause and hear him out. Slipping into his actor mode once more, he declares that since childhood, his dream has always been to become a necromancer. This leaves the guild examiners completely speechless. He continues by detailing all the traits and abilities of a necromancer with uncanny precision. Pointing directly at the investigators, he explains that this knowledge allowed him to deduce the Lick's weakness was hidden in a specific place. And if they still doubt him, he offers to show his trump card. He pulls out the decayed finger, the very offering used in the summoning. Holding it up, he explains this proves a contract was made with the Lick, and that it was never an official part of the test. Taejin drops a bombshell argument. Since a Lick can never disobey its contractor, neither he nor his allies could possibly be the masterminds. The red-haired man asks sharply who the real contractor might be, speculating it could even be someone from the Dark Magic Guild. His voice booms as he orders everyone present to show their hands. The crowd scrambles, checking each person in the area for clues. In the midst of the chaos, one man tries to slip away, immediately drawing suspicion as the true culprit. Smirking, the protagonist whispers to Miri that this is exactly how culprits get exposed in Detective Mangas. Miri only stares back at him with a blank expression. The red-haired man lunges forward. He slams directly into the culprit, pinning him down. The woman follows, instantly locking the man within a barrier spell. She invokes her art, divine technique of the dominant dragon, Dragon Strike. But before the finishing blow can land, the man takes his own life. Furious, the red-haired hunter orders the corpse to be delivered to the appropriate guild. Sehyun wonders aloud who could be insane enough to use dark magic against both the Whoring Guild and the Clear Sky Guild at once. Then with a sudden switch in demeanor, she beams at the protagonist sweetly, apologizing for the misunderstanding and promising she'll repay him someday. But before he can respond, the exhausted protagonist collapses unconscious on the spot. His teammates shout his name, voices echoing as his vision fades to black. When he awakens, it is Lee Sinha and Jinyuk who stand by his side. Confused, he asks why they are there, and Sinha explains softly that they came because their friend had fainted, while Jinyuk jokes he only wanted to check if he was really dead. A red-haired guild officer asks how far he must have pushed himself to collapse like that, noting the doctors struggled to stabilize him. After all, he had made an enormous impact during the Class B ranking exam. She even shows him her phone, displaying the news about his incredible performance. All over the community, people are congratulating him for carrying his entire team to victory almost single-handedly. Jinyuk even has the audacity to claim that without him, Taejin would have accomplished nothing at all. As they bicker, the protagonist reflects on how long it's been since they last spoke so casually, like old friends. At that moment, Yane, the representative of the Clear Sky Guild, appears. She explains that the hospital they're in is managed under her guild's authority. When he fainted, they brought him here so he could rest safely under guild care. She assures him he can relax since she personally owes him a debt. That debt, she clarifies, is because he saved a precious member of her guild, USA Irin. Speaking softly, she admits she never expected to see USA Irin again, making everyone silently imagine the pain behind those words. Then with an oddly suggestive tone, she says she would do anything he asked, a strange statement that makes the moment feel even heavier. Embarrassed, the protagonist mutters that he doesn't even know what to ask for since nothing comes to mind, while Jinyuk smirks at him from the side. Yane simply tells him to come to her office on the top floor whenever he thinks of a request, promising she'll be waiting. As soon as she stepped out of the room, Sienna rushed forward and wrapped him in a tight embrace, congratulating him warmly on how much he had improved, while Jingi-Oh could only shake his head in disbelief, muttering that he was simply lucky. Once the hug ended, Sienna immediately asked if he had already made his decision, but just like before, he admitted that he still hadn't figured out what he truly wanted. Because of his indecision, Shama reminded him that they were speaking with the vice leader of a guild, someone who held extraordinary influence. Meaning, he could easily ask her for something related to magic without any issues, since such requests would be nothing out of the ordinary for her. With a gentle smile, she handed him a small bottle filled with a drink, telling him to recover quickly. After the group departed, Miri couldn't help but comment on how incredibly lucky the protagonist really was. This made him pause to carefully consider what he should request, initially leaning toward something involving money. But he quickly realized that would be a terrible decision, because as an aspirant hunter, she could easily provide something priceless beyond mere currency. Before deciding, he reminded himself that the best request should be something he truly needed right now. Then he suddenly remembered and asked Miri what had happened to the items he previously purchased. She explained that those items had most likely been automatically stored in the parsley market. At that, Buta Sienna looked utterly lost again, clearly not understanding what she meant by market. On the other hand, Miri was delighted, because she had been waiting for the moment when the protagonist would finally ask about the market system. She eagerly explained that it was essentially a massive platform, where users from across worlds simultaneously traded with one another. In fact, there were over 100 million users from countless different dimensions actively trading every single day. If Taejon registered right now, he would gain huge advantages, such as no exchange fees, guaranteed secure transactions, and even a 7% member reward bonus. The thought shook him. He began to realize that he might be the only person on Earth with access to this kind of market system. And only then did it truly dawn on him. He was the sole person in the entire world with this uniquely updated system. Exploiting that uniqueness, he could even open a shop to resell items, since only he had the power to purchase them. By doing so, he could monopolize the entire market completely for himself. Wearing a sly, villainous grin, he laughed to himself, while Miri looked on in shock, unable to believe the reaction she was witnessing. Without any hesitation, the protagonist clicked the option. He selected to officially enter the parsley market. After verifying the information on screen, he confirmed his choice. In an instant, his entire body was transported into another space. Suddenly, he found himself standing in a massive medieval city, gazing around in awe. All around him, countless people were holding strange and rare items in their hands. Taejon couldn't help but think that the entire place felt exactly like a video game. But since they were already here, Miri encouraged him to take a look at the goods. He walked straight to the nearest vendor, a man with bizarre horns, a monocle on one eye, and an oddly styled beard. The horn merchant proudly displayed a radiant red shield in front of him. Its listed price was 18,000 parsley coins. Curious, the protagonist turned to Miri and asked how much a single parsley coin was worth. The answer left him completely stunned. 18,000 coins equaled around 240,000 magic stones, which in turn amounted to several million won. And the most shocking part was that this was just the base price for items in this market. Everything only went higher from there. It became painfully clear there was absolutely nothing here that the protagonist could afford. However, he remembered something. He pulled out an item from his inventory, claiming to be a complete newbie. He asked the horned man how much his staff would sell for. But unless someone was an exceptionally powerful mage, no one could even wield that staff, making it practically unsellable. Frustrated, the protagonist took out another item, this time a strange stone, and asked the merchant for its value. Since it came from the same monster, he expected something decent, but the merchant bluntly appraised it. To his shock, the stone was worth no more than 10 coins. Practically garbage, this crushed his dream of quickly becoming rich and monopolizing the market. As the horn merchant waved goodbye, Miri tried to comfort him, saying that small gains grow with time and wealth doesn't come overnight. He should take it easy. Just then, another figure approached, saying he wanted to take a look at the crystal and asking if Taejun had time for a trade. It turned out to be a short demon lord, but the protagonist dismissed the crystal as junk, though the demon insisted he accept the deal anyway. The demon examined it closely in his hand and confirmed his suspicions. If the item could be enhanced, it would become extremely valuable. Since he was already interested, he even offered to cover the cost of the upgrade himself. But if the upgrade failed, then the protagonist would have to bear all the costs. The demon flashed a wicked grin at Taejun, clearly plotting something. Miri immediately noticed the trick and whispered into the protagonist's ear, warning him that the demon was a scammer. The protagonist asked if there was a way to cancel, but being naive, he ultimately accepted the deal. Miri panicked, trying to pull him away, begging him to stop because this would surely end badly. But of course, our reckless hero wouldn't walk into such a shady deal without his own backup plan. With confidence, he told her to sit back and just watch. He was about to demonstrate what it truly meant to break through with sheer luck. His strategy, at least on the surface, seemed simple enough. But if he failed even once, he would be forced to shoulder the entire cost alone. The demon transferred the items and money over to the protagonist. Then he asked if the boy wanted to go for a +1 enchantment. When the enhancement succeeded, the demon congratulated him, noting that Taejun was already 80% closer to a breakthrough. Growing bolder, the demon began to provoke him further. He taunted, asking if he was really going to stop at just one upgrade and still call himself a man. The demon's lips curled into a manic grin. Internally, he mocked the protagonist as nothing more than a fool and a beginner, since the chance of reaching a +9 enchantment was less than 0.01%, about 1 in 1,000. But the moment he received the prompt, Taejun simply smirked and clicked through the upgrade screen like a lunatic, showing no hesitation at all. Miri was horrified, screaming at him to stop immediately. Meanwhile, the demon cackled, calling him insane and reminding him that if he failed, all costs would land squarely on his shoulders. But our mischievous hero only mocked him back, raising the stone high and revealing that the upgrade had succeeded. At +9, the item granted +10 to all stats and boosted mana recovery by 20% per hour. The demon tried to keep a straight face, but inside he was panicking. Taejun had succeeded in every attempt without a single failure. He even wondered for a moment if this protagonist might secretly be an administrator. Yet he couldn't let it end here, because that would mean a devastating loss for himself. So he forced a smile and congratulated the protagonist, saying it was indeed impressive. But since he had come this far, why not try for the final upgrade? After all, it was just one more step to reach the maximum. The little red demon, however, was now biting his nails and making strange, nervous expressions, something only Taejun noticed. Naturally, the protagonist also felt a wave of nervousness at the thought of one last upgrade. Thanks to the explosive growth buff, he had a 100% chance of success up to +9. But the final upgrade, even with that buff, had only a 10% chance of success, far from the original 0.001% or 1 in a million. If he failed now, he would truly lose everything. And yet he couldn't stop wondering how insanely overpowered a max-level item must be for the odds to be that low. As expected, the demon guided him deeper into the market to the so-called perfect place for upgrades. There they saw countless people stripped of all possessions, desperately begging for just one more chance to upgrade their items. Clearly, they had become hopelessly addicted, losing everything to the temptation of enchantments. The protagonist could only feel sorrow at the sight of so many ruined lives. When Miri asked if this place actually improved success chances, he calmly replied that nothing had changed at all. Still, his heart tightened with fear. He explained that luck flows like a current. Whether the chance was 10% or even 1%, success would eventually arrive. It was all about reading the timing of that flow. If one could sense it correctly, even impossible odds could be beaten. He went on to explain that this was the exact moment when he could choose to proceed or walk away. The countless gamblers who had failed before him only served as proof to determine the current flow of luck. And right now, every part of that flow was in his favor. Without hesitation, he clicked again to attempt the final enchantment. Of course, the demon sneered, thinking he was insane for chasing such a reckless gamble. The chance was nearly zero. The atmosphere grew unbearably tense. Everyone watching held their breath. The upgrade screen flickered 3 times. And then, against all odds, the item reached its maximum level. Overcome with joy, the protagonist threw his hands up and shouted, "Sayu, just like Cristiano Ronaldo." Everyone around was frozen in shock. It was not only the first time anyone had seen a fully maxed out item, but it was crafted from a material considered a national treasure. The little red demon, having lost everything, was now seething with rage. Calmly, the protagonist turned and asked who the real scammer was now. Enraged, the demon snapped back, warning that Tijin would never be allowed to log in again under his watch, and immediately began filing complaints. However, the protagonist calmly blocked the man and walked away from the parsley market. Behind him, the scammer kept screaming, demanding his resources back. Back in his hospital bed, Tijin was happily celebrating that he had mastered an item for free, even calling the demon cute. Naturally, Miri scolded him, saying his actions were far too reckless. If he had failed, he wouldn't have been able to afford the coins and materials. But the cheeky trickster just replied that if things went wrong, he would have simply run away. Once again, he slipped into psychopath mode too, staring at the obsidian crystal while asking who the real scammer was, mocking the demon as naive and foolish. Still, he was pleased because he had obtained excellent information from the market. Holding the staff, he commented that he might even be able to make use of it. The scene then shifts to the top floor of Clear Skygill Hospital. The protagonist entered, greeting the guild's vice leader, and out of courtesy, she asked if he was feeling any better. He answered that while he wasn't fully healed, he could at least move around. She remarked that if he had come in person, it must mean he had already decided on what he wanted. Meanwhile, she recalled that Tijin had placed first in the test without question. And if her intuition was correct, he was destined to grow into one of Korea's top hunters. He approached, took her hand, and boldly declared that he wanted her. Immediately, Jan explained that what he actually wanted was her ability. She asked if he always spoke in such a strange manner, and like the fool he was, he wondered aloud if he had said something wrong. She simply shook her head, admitting it was her misunderstanding, though the vice leader was clearly under pressure from the awkward situation. Meanwhile, our clueless protagonist was still wondering if he had accidentally said something inappropriate, while Miri stared at him in disbelief at what she was hearing and seeing. They then entered a large training center, where the vice leader asked if all he wanted was for her to break the curse on his item. To her, that was far simpler than what she had expected. She asked him to show her the item. Then she questioned whether he had retrieved it back when he was still a Class D after he confirmed it honestly, whether he wanted to or not. She activated her magic, her hands glowing green, and explained that since her specialty was breaking curses, it wouldn't take very long. Her ability manifested beautifully, forming a key-shaped aura above the item that descended like an unlocking door. Both the protagonist and Miri were astonished by the incredible skill of an S-class. She completed the Dispulse spell, a technique that analyzes and neutralizes magical energy. But right behind her, the protagonist appeared with a crazed look, holding a small obsidian crystal and extending it toward her back. It was revealed that, aside from its other properties, the crystal possessed a mimic function capable of scanning and storing another's ability. This was exactly what the protagonist had been aiming for from the start. Breaking the curse would have been enough, but gaining such a rare ability was an incredible opportunity. Suddenly, a rift opened. It appeared above the ability, catching Jan completely off guard. The entity began absorbing her energy for some unknown reason. Alarmed, the protagonist lunged forward, shouting the vice leader's name. He delivered a flying kick straight into the creature's face. Yet physical attacks proved utterly useless. Since brute force was ineffective, the protagonist unleashed a blue fireball at 20% of his strength, blasting it directly into the creature's chest and sending it crashing across the room. He rushed to aid Jan, but she assured him she wasn't mortally injured. She had only been careless, never expecting such a thing to appear. The protagonist asked what it was and where it had come from, suspecting it might be a monster. But she denied it, insisting it wasn't a monster despite appearances. Instead, it was the curse itself taking physical form, a cursed spirit. Shocked, the protagonist realized the curse from the staff had manifested into a body. Jan then explained that the curse was far deeper than she had anticipated, and the only way to remove it without harming the staff was through her Dispel spell. The problem was that the creature had struck her with an ability, making her unable to use her spell. That left the option of destroying the protagonist's staff. Naturally, he was not pleased by that outcome. In desperation, he asked if she possessed the ability called, begging her to lend him the Dispel spell. But she explained that this curse was extremely advanced, with a complex magical structure, and even she needed time to unravel it. He acknowledged her reasoning, yet asked if she could place her trust in him just this once. Swayed by his charisma, she deactivated her active ability. She then instructed him to listen carefully, as without her guidance it would be nearly impossible. She placed her hand on his back, channeling her energy into him, warning that it wouldn't last long, so he had to act quickly. He resolved that if she couldn't do it, then he had to succeed no matter what. Out of the corner of his eye, He spotted the crystal lying on the ground and picked it up. By sheer luck, the protagonist's calculator ability fused with the dispel spell, creating explosive growth. Once the transfer was complete, the vice leader began instructing him on how to properly use the ability. But he boldly stated that he didn't need her help, he had already figured it out. She was bewildered since no one could possibly learn such a technique purely by instinct. Yet he asked her to trust him. At that moment the green energy turned blue, blending with his own power. The energy condensed into the form of a gauntlet. With a mighty punch, he roared at the cursed spirit that he needed the staff, demanding it let go. With that single strike, the cursed spirit's body was shattered, much like Toji from Jujutsu Kaisen, leaving it fleeing while missing half its body. Yan was understandably astonished that he could wield an ability even she herself struggled to master, wondering just how talented this protagonist truly was. While she remained frozen in shock, he relentlessly pursued the cursed spirit, until at last only its head remained. But even that lost its strength to hold form, completely nullified by the dispel spell. With that, the outcome was clear. Yan admitted to herself that he was far more incredible than she had ever expected. If he were to join Clear Sky, he might even be considered a burden, not because of weakness, but because his talent far exceeded their expectations. Matapayang then prepared something for him that could prove extremely useful. Back in his quarters at Guantanamo, he was already asking if the protagonist really just wanted to learn the Ascending Dragon Fist. The guild's leader was proud, saying the choice was wise since it was the ultimate martial art. It was powerful enough to rip apart a massive centipede. The protagonist could only smirk, holding the crystal tightly, having perfectly analyzed Matt's ability. At the Mythgil headquarters, inside the training hall, the protagonist unleashed the Ascending Dragon strike on a three-headed dog, instantly reducing it to two heads before it collapsed. Teijin remarked that first-tier items truly were on another level and expressed gratitude to the leader of the Whoring Guild for granting him the martial art for free. Naturally, the protagonist gained an advantage. If he had known it would be this effective, he would have followed the advice of the old muscular man and trained consistently. I want all of you in Balneario Camborio in 2025. Speaking of Balneario, have you left your like, my friend? I certainly hope so. Knowing what he must do, he resolved to maximize his strength. We then skip to when Sienna arrives with a few. While pondering how things had come to this point, she noticed that he had been. His growth was anything but natural, more like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. She grew nervous, since he didn't know she had borrowed the training hall without permission for his sake. If he found out, she would be in serious trouble. Yet he only tapped her head lightly, saying he believed she would never lend the training room without authorization. Noticing the martial art that the protagonist was using, he approached, remarking that he had heard the young goat had passed the rank B classification test. In the end, he wasn't wrong about the protagonist, nor was he disappointed. Since our protagonist had not yet joined any guild or organization, he was still considered a freelancer, so there was no issue when Sehyun made him an offer on the spot. Seeing his interest, Sehyun explained that an expedition was scheduled in a few days with Siona as the team leader. However, one member had dropped out after suffering a fatal injury. But before he could continue, the redhead interrupted, saying she felt the expedition might be far too dangerous for Teijin. After all, it was the first time they would be investigating this expedition site. Teijin believed she was underestimating him. Sujavan reassured them, saying there was no need to worry because with Teijin's level of skill, he was more than qualified to participate in the dungeon sweep. He reminded them that this was only an invitation, not an obligation. Finally, Sujavan asked the protagonist again for his thoughts, pointing out that training against real creatures was far more valuable than practice inside a training room. Naturally, the protagonist agreed, but he asked if, as a freelancer, he would be allowed to keep all the magic stones dropped by the monsters. Soon after, the protagonist received a message on his phone, instructing him to arrive precisely at 11:30. He could only think about how irritatingly specific that was. While he pondered, Miri asked if he was really sure about entering a dungeon when the mastermind behind the exam incident had not even been revealed yet. She also questioned whether he could truly trust the Myth Guild. He confidently replied that the leader of the Whoring Guild and the Myth Guild had been friends for over 20 years. Even if they tried to stab him in the back, he said, it wouldn't matter. Even if they ambushed him, they would never be able to defeat him. He said this with such confidence that it practically guaranteed something would go wrong. As he continued walking, the scene cut to Sehyun approaching and asking him to introduce himself to the rest of the team. There we meet three members, the Lancer Choi Yushik, the healer Yoon Ayan, and No Young Shul, the youngest member, who turned out to be a gunslinger. All of them were naturally from Group 3. They gave their introductions, and finally the protagonist asked if everyone was present so they could begin. But Siona explained that one more person had not yet arrived. At that moment, from inside a car, a large man covered in tattoos, wearing several pieces of jewelry and carrying an expensive bag stepped out. He immediately asked if the protagonist hadn't heard him, questioning if he was deaf. This arrogant, hostile-looking man turned out to be their final companion. To be polite, the protagonist approached, introduced himself, and asked for the man's name. However, the man simply stared at him, before spitting at the ground near him in disdain. After spitting, he walked past them, saying that if everyone was there, they should hurry up and stop wasting time. The protagonist's veins bulged in fury, and he nearly leapt at the man's throat, ready to throw 3 punches. But Siona quickly stepped in, calming him down, and explained that despite his rude behavior and appearance, the man was still a well-known figure in the industry. She revealed that he was none other than class of freelancer hunter Kim Joo-hun, nicknamed Trash, both for his personality and his character. Yet even so, his skills were unmatched, even among high-ranking hunters. The biggest problem was that he abused his freelance status to monopolize all the magic stones. Clearly, she had no desire to work with him on this expedition, but she had no choice. In his mind, the protagonist decided to treat this so-called piece of trash the same way he treated everyone else. As the monsters began raging like RPG barbarians, Kim fought recklessly, smashing them with his expensive bag. He pushed past Siona, who scolded him for hogging all the action since their arrival and acting completely solo. She warned that such reckless behavior would endanger not only him, but the entire team. Siona was clearly furious, but Kim ignored her, instead blaming their lack of progress on her and even pointing his finger in her face. He declared that the strongest hunters deserved the most money and fame, finishing by outright calling her a joke. He sneered, questioning how someone like her had ended up leading the team. In the background, our protagonist walked with the angriest expression he had shown so far. Even Miri was visibly annoyed by the man's disrespect. When Siona tried to thank him, Kim rudely interrupted, mocking the Duke as an old man and demanding he get straight to the point. The Duke explained that this land was once a place where a great evil had been sealed long ago. Now it was completely cursed and unfit for human habitation. Their mission was to banish the dark energy. The protagonist then interrupted, stating that it seemed the artifact had already been stolen. The Duke confirmed this, explaining that if the artifact was recovered, the land could be restored and one day life might return. He revealed that the invaders had shattered the artifact into pieces and carried them in different directions. Before he could elaborate further, Kim mocked him again, saying he was overcomplicating something so simple. Kim suggested they split into teams, and immediately said he wanted to pair up with the protagonist, unless someone objected. Putting on his best acting face, the protagonist told Kim that it was an honor to work with him, even calling him sir. He claimed to be inspired by Kim's speech about strength. He agreed wholeheartedly that the strongest hunters deserved the most wealth and fame, even declaring that he wanted to follow Kim's example. Kim was pleased with the flattery. Soon they arrived at a graveyard. Still in acting mode, the protagonist asked if he could stick close to Kim. However, as time passed and no monsters appeared, Kim grew frustrated and shouted at the unseen creatures to stop hiding. His irritation only grew when he noticed that monsters were spawning only around Taejin. For a brief moment, he wondered if the protagonist had orchestrated it, but dismissed the thought. Taejin smirked, his expression turning outright psychotic as he watched Kim use the taunt ability. His wide-area taunt was truly unique, drawing in hordes of monsters like a deadly magnet. Surrounded on all sides, Kim began to panic and shouted at Taejin to help him, but Taejin coolly refused, saying he couldn't abandon his designated area. Overwhelmed, Kim shouted again, demanding assistance. Enveloped in a blue aura, the protagonist activated Phantom Step, followed immediately by the Ascending Dragon Strike. In one devastating move, he obliterated every zombie in the vicinity. When the dust finally cleared, Taejin casually thanked Kim for his taunt ability, remarking that no one would have guessed just how many monsters had been lurking nearby. Visibly shaken, Kim suggested they leave immediately, insisting that they had already secured the artifact. However, Taejin and the rest of the team disagreed. The sharpshooter in particular was impressed by the sheer number of crystals the protagonist had collected, so many that they could not even fit into a single inventory. To maintain his good guy image, the protagonist offered to share some with the others, which left Kim stunned and Miri even more so. Yet everyone declined, insisting it would be unfair to take advantage of his generosity since he had earned them all himself. The protagonist simply said he was following Kim's own example. To reinforce his point, he playfully threatened Kim, asking if he was right, and of course Kim agreed. The group then thanked both the protagonist and the big guy. Siona, however, was lost in thought, uncertain of exactly what the protagonist had done, but aware that he had undeniably succeeded. Thanks to their efforts, the cursed land now had the chance to bloom with life once more. Siona asked the Duke to hand over the artifacts, but the Duke admitted he had failed to protect them from the barbarians. As a result, the sealed evil had been released, slaughtering everyone in its path. He confirmed it, but Siona pressed on with the most important question of all. How had he survived? The atmosphere immediately grew tense. The Lord suddenly began laughing, praising her sharp mind, noting that most people would never have noticed. But he explained that it was already too late since he had been regaining his strength ever since the artifacts were brought into the castle. As he spoke, he tore off his cloak, revealing his true form. He unveiled himself as the hidden boss, Duke Duas, a high-ranking vampire also known as the Great Evil, with a danger rating of F+. This revealed it was actually a duplicated mission. If the Lord collected the artifacts, a new mission would begin. The protagonist found this fascinating, realizing he had finally discovered the true meaning of a duplicated mission. For some reason, the redhead began approaching him, walking directly toward him while carrying the artifacts. This left Tejan baffled, asking what she was doing. Handing them over would only make the old man stronger. But before he could finish, he was suddenly attacked from all directions by his own teammates. He narrowly evaded every one of their strikes. Realizing instantly, he deduced they had all fallen under the vampire's evil eye charm. Our protagonist, however, remained unaffected thanks to the obsidian he carried, which nullified such abilities. In response, Tejan flipped the Duke off, mocking that he wasn't into ancient vampires and that the Duke should try wooing grandmothers at a senior home. The enraged vampire growled but declared it didn't matter, he had already gathered all the artifacts. Tejan sighed, clearly finding the entire situation troublesome, as the Duke taunted him further. The vampire insisted that no matter how powerful Tejan was, he would still be forced to fight his own companions. And in the end, it would lead only to tragedy. Yet, contrary to his expectation, Tejan calmly funneled energy into his middle finger, preparing to unleash it. With that flick, he struck his allies right on their foreheads. They were instantly knocked unconscious, especially Kim after Tejan flicked him. He followed with a delayed impact punch so devastating that Kim collapsed seconds later. Advancing toward the Duke, the protagonist asked if perhaps he had been underestimated. Boasting, he said this fight was easier than eating pie, and he hadn't even suffered a scratch, proof that combining physical prowess with magic was invaluable. This left the vampire visibly shaken. Trembling, he barked at Shinna to protect him until he had fully recovered his strength. She obeyed instantly, launching an attack against the protagonist. Tejan held back, realizing she was the one person he couldn't defeat with a simple flick. Because if he used his ascending dragon fist, it would end her life outright. That was why Tejan refused to strike seriously. After all, it would be tragic for one of them to die at their comrade's hands. With a baffled look, Tejan stared at the vampire, questioning what nonsense he was even talking about. Then he noticed something. The vampire's charm seemed to weaken for a brief moment. Even the Duke grew confused, barking new orders for Shinna to move and finish Tejan. At this point, the vampire fully convinced himself they were actually in love. Acting on that delusion, he spoke up, saying there was something he had wanted to confess for a long time. He asked if she remembered last Christmas, when she gave him a wallet, saying a man with a fine wallet would attract great wealth. But our cheeky madman ruined the mood completely, smirking as he admitted he had sold that wallet at the market. He explained he wasn't supposed to, but desperation had forced him to sell it. Miri glared at him with visible disappointment, but Tejan believed her anger would keep her frozen long enough for him to act. He shouted at the vampire, demanding how he dared to use such tricks on his friends, and vowed never to let him use that cursed ability again. To achieve this, he gathered his mana and drove both fingers straight into the vampire's eyes, channeling dispel magic through the strike. The Duke roared in agony, demanding Tejan pull his fingers out immediately. But Tejan simply smirked, refusing to comply. Once his dispel reached full power, the vampire's charm ability was nullified completely. The Duke stumbled back, his vision ruined. Though his eyes remained damaged, his confusion grew deeper, wondering what Tejan had done to him. It was beyond comprehension, since no one had ever resisted him this way. The only possible explanation was that his mana had been drained. But the madman only laughed, asking why he should care. Since the Duke was doomed to die, there was no need to explain. He taunted further, saying that if the Duke was really curious, he could always look it up on a wiki, but not while dead. The vampire seethed, furious that the protagonist dared joke at such a time. He vowed to wipe that grin from Tejan's face, declaring that it was Tejan, not him, who would die here. With rage, he conjured a blood-forged sword and charged to strike. But before he reached his target, the redhead intervened. She praised Tijin for holding out so well, and told him to leave the rest to them. She shouted to the group that this was their chance, now that the Duke couldn't use his mental powers. They had to unite their strength and bring him down together. At once, everyone began preparing their ultimate abilities, with Siona standing firm, blocking the Duke from acting. The vampire howled in fury, demanding if they really believed such weaklings could defeat him. Meanwhile, the protagonist simply watched with a calm smirk, remarking that the Duke would soon fall to the very pathetic people he mocked. Just then, No Young Shul appeared at his side, firing 2 shots. He announced that he had been waiting for this exact moment. Determined not to be a burden, both bullets struck true, injuring the vampire. His wounds prevented him from unleashing more abilities. While 3 of them held the Duke back, the redhead focused all her energy into her blade. She chanted words of power. The storm that cleaves the winds, the thunder that splits the sky, become one with my sword. Then she unleashed her ultimate move, the devastating cut. The attack cleaved the vampire in half, leaving only his legs standing. Catching his breath, Tijin introduced himself once more, Li Tijin, and vowed never to lower his guard even at the very end. As the Duke's charred remains smoldered, Sienna remarked how close the battle had been. She congratulated him on the victory, but the protagonist asked if they truly remembered everything that had just happened, when the redhead pressed him on why he cared. He laughed it off, saying the gate had already opened and they should just return, celebrate with a well-deserved barbecue and enjoy themselves. The redhead was the only one who seemed to recall Kim, but he was still lying on the ground like discarded trash. The healer then invited the protagonist to join them for the barbecue, yet he declined, saying he had other matters to handle, prompting Siona to ask if he had another plan beyond them. Everyone admired his determination, and the redhead in particular noted that he always brimmed with energy, urging him not to push himself too far. She stepped back with a smile, adding that he could call on them later since they'd be out until late. With that, they stepped out of the portal, leaving only Miri, who wasn't fooled. She immediately pressed him, saying she knew he wasn't planning to just study the dungeon as he claimed. He chuckled, admitting she knew him too well. Though in the past he truly had worked hard, dedicating himself fully, whether for survival or growth. But this time she was right. He only wanted to investigate one thing hidden within the labyrinth's navigation. With his usual dramatic flair, he urged her to follow, saying they should explore together. And so they pressed onward. Miri observed that nothing seemed unusual here, though her instincts told her otherwise. After several attempts, he finally managed to uncover a hidden passage. Miri's eyes widened in disbelief, startled by what lay ahead. Tijin admitted he never expected to use this item, but the timing was perfect. He retrieved the lick staff from his inventory. Raising it high, he summoned with a purple aura, commanding, "Answer my call and appear, Eridus." At once, a massive skeleton emerged from the ground, shocking Miri. The giant, however, wore a skirt reminiscent of Broly from Dragon Ball, and his demeanor showed little respect for the summoner. He clearly held a grudge. The skeleton Eridus roared in recognition. Our cocky protagonist welcomed him casually, asking how he'd been. Tijin teased further with a smug grin, boasting about how handy the staff was and asking if Eridus enjoyed it. Then he joked that he had already slain the spirit inside. Shrugging, he complained that the spear had been troublesome but ultimately irrelevant. His attention then shifted. Scolding Eridus for his tone, he bonked the skeleton's head with the staff. He warned that no matter how he was summoned, if he ever spoke like that again, he'd be turned into bone soup. The rattled Eridus swore never to repeat the mistake. Tijin recalled that Eridus had always talked like this, but let it slide. Instead, he issued his first command: to march down the supposedly safe path ahead. Eridus, knowing it was a trap, nervously asked if he really had to proceed unarmed and blind. Tijin answered with a thinly veiled threat about disappointing his commander. Terrified, the skeleton sprinted forward at full speed, only to be smashed to pieces by a massive stone wall, unsurprisingly. Miri gasped in horror, while Tijin calmly marked the newly discovered trap on his map, pleased that one danger was now identified. Afterward, he simply raised his staff again, summoning Eridus once more. The skeleton reappeared, awkwardly piecing himself back together. Tijin triumphantly marks another trap cleared on the dungeon map. Miri then questions whether he truly intends to keep doing this until every single trap is disarmed. Tijin, unbothered, confirms it directly, asking if she sees any issue with his approach. He firmly declares his creed, introducing himself once again as Li Tijin, the man who never shows mercy to those who dare try to kill him. With that, Tijin summons Eridus once more, scolding the skeleton for slacking and urging him to move forward since plenty of traps still remain. Half of the skeleton's body lies scattered on the ground while Tijin stands tall, praising his excellent service and declaring him the finest trap detector imaginable. This allows the summon to endure, and Hage muses to himself how remarkable it is that Eridus no longer perishes so easily to the traps. He considers that most summons don't evolve just from repeated deaths, so this must be tied to the explosive growth mechanism. Tejan then remarks aloud on how much Eridus has improved, causing the skeleton to glow with genuine happiness at the rare praise. Yet Tejan leaves him behind, deciding he'll need to investigate the explosive growth mechanism more thoroughly once they exit the dungeon. Eridus, however, feels disrespected, irritated that Tejan walks off after offering nothing more than a casual compliment. To him, it is outrageous. Immortals have rights too, and even Tejan should acknowledge them. But Tejan coldly ignores the complaint, dismissing the summon and storing the staff back in his inventory, saying it's time to refocus on treasure hunting. Watching silently, Miri realizes just how heartless Tejan truly is. She then notes that there no longer seem to be traps or new paths, suggesting they've reached the dungeon's end. When Miri asks if Tejan suspects anything here, he points to the massive tombstone before them, insisting it looks suspicious. The instant he touches it, glowing pink squares etched with strange symbols spread across its surface. Suddenly, the enormous tombstone splits apart. Tejan immediately recognizes the bracelet inside, its design resembling relics they had seen during a past mission. Yet this bracelet isn't tied to any mission. He can only guess its worth, and by all signs, it's incredibly valuable. Hoping for fortune, he begins praying to any deity listening that it will be of high rank. While he prays, Miri bluntly asks why he doesn't just use the system's item analyzer. Tejan freezes mid-prayer, stunned, and demands she repeat what she just said. Miri explains that the analyzer is a basic system feature, widely used across dimensions to instantly evaluate items, so essential that everyone else treats it as indispensable. She then asks if he likes the idea, but Tejan and No snap at her for keeping this secret. Miri angrily shouts back that she already installed multiple system functions for him. It's not her fault he wasn't paying attention. Tejan sheepishly admits he hadn't been listening and decides to try the analyzer at last. The bracelet binds to him immediately, granting 2 special abilities plus a boost of +1 to all stats. These powers are named Vampire Aesthetics and Vampire Charm. The find is astonishing. It's a unique ranked item with 2 formidable abilities. Vampire Aesthetics, an A-rank ability, erases wounds from Tejan's body before they can linger. It's an advanced healing skill but cannot fix deep cuts or fractures. Since it's passive, it consumes no mana. Vampire Charm, also A-rank, allows him to enchant a target by spending 50 mana. However, it fails against opponents with mental defenses above rank B or those not already weakened. Overjoyed, Tejan celebrates gaining such a powerful passive healing skill. Miri marvels at how useful enchanting humans could be, realizing the strategic value. With his usual psychopathic grin, Tejan responds by asking why she thinks it wouldn't be useful. After all, humans are everywhere and can serve as convenient tools. Miri grows uneasy as he casually discusses exploiting them. Tejan dismisses her concerns, saying she simply doesn't understand humans. But then our protagonist senses something amiss. The assassin reveals himself, standing directly in front of him. The assassin notes how Tejan, once just a broken D-rank dormant, is now rising as a promising talent approaching rank B. Yet as the assassin prepares to strike, he's suddenly met with a brutal kick to the face. Tejan, confused, wonders if the navigation system might be malfunctioning. The blow forces the assassin out of hiding, proving he had been there all along, even if navigation alone couldn't detect him. The assassin panics, realizing Tejan isn't a weakling fluke at all, while Tejan muses whether the man truly wields invisibility. To break his will, Tejan threatens to beat him to death unless he reveals himself properly. As Tejan had already warned, refusing to show himself meant getting beaten down. Sure enough, a crushing kick to the back sends the assassin flying like a soccer ball. What follows is a relentless barrage of punches, almost comically reminiscent of JoJo. He unleashes a flurry of aura blows upon the helpless man. After the savage beating, the assassin begs for mercy, apologizing frantically and pleading for his life. Tejan mocks him, remarking that he hasn't even truly started yet, and laments how kids these days lack courage. Now that the enemy is visible, Tejan begins interrogating him, asking his name and origins. The battered man's head now bears 2 swollen lumps resembling Mickey Mouse ears. He confesses that the red dogs are nothing but criminals who extort money and kill hunters. Grabbing the thug by the collar, Tejan demands to know why such notorious trash had come to this dungeon. Terrified, the man insists he was only following orders. Tejan coldly replies that blindly following orders is no excuse for irresponsibility. Mocking him, Tejan nicknames their gang the Hot Dogs and warns he has a few questions, charging energy in his hand while readying Vampire Charm. With a chilling glare, he warns the man to answer carefully or suffer worse. Meanwhile, the Red Dog's leader grows suspicious, wondering why the invisible man hasn't returned. Taking this long against a simple rank B makes no sense. But the odd one among them, sitting back listening to his playlist, tells the others not to blame the rookie too harshly since he lacks field experience. At that very moment, Tijin appears carrying the unconscious assassin's body. He mocks the three brothers by name, ridiculing them as awakened hunters who stooped to dirty work. He even twists the knife by saying that if their late parents saw them now, they would weep tears of blood over how pathetic their sons had become. Scarface Jongpil, furious, demands to know how Tijin discovered such personal family details. Had he tortured their youngest brother? Calmly, Tijin confirms he extracted the truth himself after the youngest proved less cooperative. Paraguay tries to shout insults back, but Jongpil silences him. He concludes that Tijin must be using some kind of mind-manipulating magic. Tijin sarcastically applauds their unshakable brotherly trust, calling it touching, and even offers them a pretend praise sticker before flipping them off. Jongpil roars that Tijin won't escape alive. Tijin, unimpressed, smirks and dares him to try. Annoyed at their long speeches, Tijin turns to Paraguay and L, warning them to spill the truth unless they want to end up like their brother. He demands answers, threatening them with the same brutal fate. They finally admit they disguised themselves as dungeon explorers to ambush him. When Tijin didn't leave as expected, they infiltrated the dungeon themselves to finish the assassination. Outside, the Alliance's vice leader meets with Tijin and Sehyun. She admits the guild had been careless. They already knew Tijin would be targeted again after the rank B evaluation scandal. Preparations had been made, but no one anticipated the villains would sneak into a myth-rank dungeon. Taking responsibility, she apologizes, but Tijin reassures her there's no need. He had already anticipated something like this. It had simply happened sooner than he expected. Sehyun, however, can't contain his rage. To him, targeting not just Kang Jian and Yusei Rin but even Tijin himself is unforgivable. Furious, he insists on storming the Red Dog's base to beat confessions out of them. But Tijin calmly says there's no need, he already knows who ordered the hit. Vice Leader Yane asks if Tijin uncovered the truth himself. Sehyun, surprised, wonders if the enemies had confessed that easily. Tijin casually explains they were more talkative than expected. Yane demands to know who dared to target Yusei Rin, Kang Jian, and Tijin alike. Her aura flares so intensely even Miri is struck speechless. Tijin finally reveals the mastermind, Ba Hyun-soo, leader of the Saiyan Guild. Both guild representatives are stunned. They never imagined Hyun-soo would be behind it. Sehyun erupts, insisting it was obvious, pointing to Hyun-soo's sinister demeanor as proof. Yane, however, calmly analyzes the situation. She recalls Hyun-soo's ruthless ambition, willing to do anything to climb the guild rankings, no matter how inhumane. With Tijin's confirmation, Yane declares the truth undeniable. She announces her intention to rally her guild's elites and ensure Saiyan pays dearly for daring to target the prodigy hunters. As she and Sehyun prepare to march, Tijin asks to accompany them. He wants to look directly into the eyes of the man who tried to have him killed. The scene then shifts to Saiyan Guild headquarters, where chaos has already erupted. Sehyun bursts through walls, furiously demanding Hyun-soo show himself. Meanwhile, Yane storms in from another direction. She commands the guild members to bring out their leader immediately, backed by an intimidating army radiating immense pressure. She warns that if they don't produce Hyun-soo, the entire building will be reduced to ashes. The guild members desperately try to reason with her, but Yane orders her forces to attack without hesitation. Fireballs rain down, detonating in a massive explosion. One terrified guild member rushes to Hyun-soo's office, shouting that the Blue Sky and whoring guild representatives have invaded. Hyun-soo curses, blaming his incompetent subordinates and wondering where everything went wrong. He begins preparing to escape, convinced that not even guild leaders could break through his fortified vault door. But before he can flee, a deafening bang echoes through the chamber. Through a crack in the vault door, Hyun-soo sees a chilling sight, Tijin peeking in, asking if this is really where he thought he could hide and whether he truly believed he wouldn't be found. Hyun-soo panics instantly, recognizing him, stammering in disbelief as he asks if it's really Tijin. The young hunter confirms it with a cold smile, introducing himself as a rank B hunter and calling this his respectful greeting. But then he casually remarks that he simply walked in, since he's quite skilled at finding people. Hyun-soo tries to bargain, asking if it's money Tijin wants, opening a briefcase packed with cash and telling him to take it and leave. He swears there's plenty more if Tijin just walks away, but Miri warns him not to be swayed by the crook's schemes. Back to reality, Tijin admits the offer is tempting. But he makes it clear he's not here for dirty money. Instead, he wants to confirm something about the promotion exam, asking if Hyun-soo worked with someone else. Tijin claims he already knows most of the truth, so Hyun-soo might as well be honest. He taunts him, saying he baited him earlier but he didn't take the hook. Joking coldly, Taejin says he'll just beat him up and deliver him to headquarters if he refuses to talk. Of course, as the leader of a guild like Seiyin, Hyun-soo is no weakling. He demands to know who Taejin thinks he is, calling him arrogant for acting so important, claiming he doesn't fear some doorman. He remarks that this could have all been avoided if Taejin had just accepted his first offer. Meanwhile, he reveals his dark matter ability, analyzing its overwhelming power. As a rank S skill, dark matter absorbs all energy except the caster's own. It blocks ranged attacks and drains mana and stamina in close combat, making approach nearly impossible. Hyun-soo orders Taejin to step aside if he values his life. Any rational man would retreat. But Taejin, hardly rational, calls him a liar, insisting the ability is fake. Even while holding back, Taejin notices Hyun-soo's poor endurance, wondering how someone so fragile became a guild leader. Taejin tells him to stop making noise since this won't kill him anyway. Concluding the talk is over, Taejin seizes Hyun-soo's head and activates Vampire Charm to rip the truth from him. As his hand closes in, the scene cuts to the ruined Seiyin guild building, parts missing. Sehun shouts congratulations, praising Taejin for capturing Hyun-soo. He calls him 100 times more competent than the useless headquarters staff, but Taejin humbly credits the two leaders, saying he couldn't have done it alone. He notes the building itself might have collapsed if not for their intervention. Taejin acknowledges Sehun's strength but asks about Guild Master Sehun. Sehun reassures him she'll arrive soon, gathering evidence from the office. Conveniently, a swirling portal appears the moment he finishes. The documents reveal several high-ranking officials were involved, though they fled abroad. Sehun, having suspected this, asks whether there's proof linking other hunters or guilds. Sehun confirms the exam tampering was orchestrated solely by Hyun-soo and his subordinates. Sehun laments the greed of those who accepted Hyun-soo's bribes, blaming him for the corruption. Dragging Hyun-soo by the ear, Sehun vows not to hand him over so easily, promising to make him regret everything. Hyun-soo screams for mercy, but no one helps him. Yain then asks Taejin if he captured Hyun-soo in his underground hideout. After he confirms it, she admits they owe him once again, never expecting to need his help in such matters. But Taejin denies it, insisting he acted on his own to expose the hidden forces behind the plot. Yain looks puzzled, so he explains the exam tampering couldn't have been Hyun-soo's work alone. With elite dark mages and assassins involved, a larger power must be backing him. He vows to dismantle not just Hyun-soo's empire but every force supporting him. With conviction, he declares that all wrongdoers must face justice. Miri rolls her eyes at his grandstanding, while Yain is genuinely surprised by his resolve. Yain asks if he's identified the ones backing Hyun-soo. He denies it but shoots her a suspicious look. The scene shifts to a dark office, lit only by a laptop's glow. News spreads that Hyun-soo confessed to exam tampering 2 days after capture. A man grows anxious, fearing this could trace back to him, but quickly reassures himself. They only signed a contract under a sealing spell, his identity should remain hidden. Just then, a knock at the door interrupts his thoughts. It's the Skull Guild's vice leader, Jo Yanti, reporting that someone seeks an audience. Nervously, the man says to let them in. He fears Hyun-soo may have spilled secrets, though he doubts it. The visitor enters masked, then removes the disguise, revealing none other than Lee Taejin, the madman himself. Both men recognize him immediately from the Rank B test, where his meddling foiled their attempt to eliminate Sirin and Jian. Taejin begins acting bizarrely, performing a handstand and spinning around the room. He seems completely unhinged, even running on his arms instead of legs. Outraged, the Skull Guild's vice leader charges at him, channeling energy into his strike. He roars, demanding to know what's wrong with Taejin for barging in and behaving like a lunatic. But the attack doesn't faze Taejin. Instead, he mocks him, saying it's exactly what he expected from Skull Guild's number 1. Even the bald vice leader finds himself grudgingly impressed. Taejin had used only raw physical strength to nullify the attack. On top of that, he deliberately chose a technique that bound the vice leader's movement briefly. Declaring the test complete, he introduces himself formally. The guild leader, baffled, questions what nonsense Taejin is spouting, storming in, babbling about tests, and now expecting acceptance. But Taejin simply confirms it. Of course he must test the strongest man in the guild he's about to join, to see how they handle the unexpected. Even so, the guild master reaches his limit, poking a finger into Taejin's chest. He reminds him that this isn't a place where anyone can spew nonsense, especially someone like Taejin who doesn't even know basic necromancy. Unfazed, Taejin jokes about their obsession with necromancy, saying that fixation is exactly why the Skull Guild has been failing. The bald man's anger boils. He shouts back that he revolutionized dark magic and necromancy, making them symbols of national strength. Thanks to him, the guild once ranked among Korea's top 5. The truth only infuriates him further, but he cannot deny it. Still, he realizes they cannot afford to be too selective in desperate times. Crisis must become opportunity. Sitting atop the guild leader's desk, Taejin declares this is one of those moments. If they accept him, he promises to help the Skull Guild rise again from the ashes. Jo Yanti looks conflicted, aware of the risks. But then Taejin hands him a document that changes everything. As the guild master reads it, his face twists into sheer panic. When the vice leader asks, it becomes clear Taejin knows everything. He has evidence of the artifact used to manipulate the B-rank exam and the shady deals between Cho and Hyun-soo. Realizing the depth of Taejin's knowledge, Cho yields, signing the contract and welcoming Taejin as their newest member. Though the vice leader fumes over admitting someone without necromancy, Cho tells him to calm down. He acknowledges Taejin's extraordinary skill, certain he will benefit the guild. The vice leader warns that Taejin is clearly here to exploit them, but still issues a final caution. Back at Taejin's home, he finally enjoys a rare moment of peace. Even sipping coffee feels like bliss after all the chaos. Ever-cheerful Miri comments on how good his life seems now, though she reminds him to stay cautious. Naturally, Taejin insists he always has a plan, never idle, always prepared. Miri doubts him, suspecting it's just bravado. But Taejin shows her a ring taken from the Red Dogs. He explains it's how they managed so many crimes undetected. When worn, the ring alters his appearance to others. Though advanced detection might pierce it, most people will not recognize him. Taejin asks Miri to simply enjoy the peaceful moment with him. Still, Miri wonders why he chose the Skull Guild when he had better options like Myth, Foreign, or Sky. Taejin explains that while those guilds are prestigious, working with them would be exhausting. Endless expeditions abroad, political meetings, and constant obligations come with the big three. The Skull Guild, ranked only 22nd nationally, draws less attention, meaning he can quietly collect mana stones. Besides, he adds slyly, he negotiated his contract to keep 100% of the mana stone commission. Genius. Miri finally understands but asks what he plans next. Taejin, having stayed in too long, considers going shopping. Miri is shocked since he's usually so frugal. But Taejin believes it's fine to splurge occasionally and enjoy the rewards of his labor. He never imagined visiting a place like this, marveling at how money changes everything. Curious, Miri asks what kind of place it is. It doesn't look like a normal shopping mall. With a flourish, Taejin reveals it is the world's largest hunter marketplace, famed among hunters everywhere. Wonwoljian. Korea's massive hunter-exclusive market. Not just a mall, it boasts VIP zones, cultural halls, entire floors for weapons, armor, and accessories, and even grand ballrooms. Rare equipment of the highest quality arrives weekly, far beyond Miri's imagination. Presenting it like a commercial, Taejin earns Miri's applause. While he was still daydreaming about all the treasures waiting inside, his thoughts were suddenly interrupted. A sleek car rolled up beside him and someone called out his name. The person almost failed to recognize him at first, thanks to the ring disguising his appearance. She introduced herself as Chai Yairn, none other than the leader of the Myth Guild. She explained that she had heard of him through her brother and never expected their meeting to happen this quickly. Taejin, curious, asked who she was and she clarified her position. As he shook her hand, he wondered aloud what could bring a guild leader to a place like this. To his shock, she revealed that she owned the entire mega market and visited weekly to personally oversee the latest arrivals. Taejin was floored. If he had known Myth controlled this place, he would have joined them on the spot. Embarrassed, he apologized for not realizing sooner, but Yairn reassured him it was perfectly normal since she rarely appeared in public media. She then asked if Taejin had some free time, as she wanted to thank him personally. She mentioned that her brother told her about Taejin's crucial role during the Cursed Territory expedition. According to the hunters, without his intervention, they would never have completed the dungeon. In fact, the entire third team, and possibly the Myth Guild itself, could have been wiped out. Though Taejin appreciated her gratitude, he humbly declined any rewards, insisting he hadn't done it for recognition. Yairn admired his humility, but offered him one final gesture of appreciation. She invited him to choose any item he wished from the exclusive VIP section. Taejin immediately recognized this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Yet when Yairn began to put her card away, saying there was nothing she could do if he truly refused, Taejin realized how foolish it would be to miss out. Just as she was about to leave, he placed his hand on her shoulder and asked her to wait. He politely requested to take a quick look at what was available. Inside the elevator, Yairn commented that he was far more ordinary than she had imagined. Considering his intimidating aura and the rumors surrounding him, she expected someone with a more overwhelming presence. Taejin, a bit flustered, admitted he might have accidentally raised her expectations. She assured him it wasn't a bad thing. On the contrary, she found his down-to-earth nature refreshing. However, she jokingly added that Shumina probably wouldn't appreciate her saying so. The elevator doors opened, and she explained that this area was reserved exclusively for VIP customers. But since this was a special case, he was free to explore and take his time choosing. The space before him was dazzling, white decor, elegant paintings, and endless corridors. Tijin gawked at necklaces and armors worth billions of won, amazed that Yairn owned all of it. He was practically drooling when Yairn teased him, asking if he had spotted anything interesting. One item, however, caught his attention. Pointing to it, he asked her to explain what it was. Impressed by his choice, Yairn explained that everything in that section once belonged to legendary guild masters such as Huering and Shenanian. Both had been icons of Korea, but were now too old to wield these artifacts. She noted that the items were preserved as tributes to their legacy and were unfortunately not for sale. She recommended he browse elsewhere, since there were even better options still available. Just then, a man arrived to inform Yairn that the leader of the Hyaman Guild had arrived. She suggested they continue their conversation later in her office. Tijin politely saw her off, assuring her not to worry. Miri teased him afterward, joking that bowing so deeply would hurt his back. Tijin responded that it was all part of professionalism. Still, Miri was puzzled as to why Tijin seemed so fascinated by those worn-out gauntlets when there were so many better choices. The gauntlet's durability was almost completely gone, rendering it useless. Miri wasn't wrong, but Tijin had noticed something others had missed. It contained a hidden note stating it had synergy with the skills of the Ascendant Dragon. Based on his experience, the system never gave him an impossible task. Every challenge was always within his reach. This mission required finding an item that could synergize with his abilities and unlock a new tab in his status window. Clearly, there had to be a way to restore the gauntlet. Lamenting his inability to obtain it right now, he even muttered that he would do anything to fix it. Half-jokingly, he claimed he would even bark like a dog if that's what it took to get the gauntlet. Suddenly, a voice asked about a matter they thought had already been settled. The voice mentioned that the additional contract fee had already been paid. Tijin immediately recognized it as Yairn's. Sensing an opportunity, he figured that if she was in trouble, helping her might earn him some favor. With that thought, he bolted toward her like a loyal dog determined to assist. In the meeting room, Yairn sounded frustrated. She reminded the other party that they had already discussed this matter. She asked how long they intended to keep being so stubborn. The leader of the Hyaman Guild, Kang Yangxiak, praised her boldness as a businesswoman but criticized her harsh words. He insisted that his guild charged fairly for their high standards, asking if she disagreed with their right to do so. Yairn struggled to believe his audacity, but before she could reply, Tijin burst into the room, having overheard their voices. He stepped in and asked if this was some kind of negotiation. Kang was immediately enraged, demanding that Tijin leave at once. He didn't even bother to learn who the newcomer was. Even Yairn warned Tijin that now wasn't the best time, but he brushed it off, insisting that if this was an executive negotiation, then he should also take part in the discussion. He casually sat down, ready to talk business. Kang nearly exploded with rage, demanding to know who Tijin was. Yairn herself was caught off guard, unable to explain. But Tijin had already pieced together what was happening. He knew the Hyaman Guild specialized in item appraisals, monopolizing the Korean market since so few guilds could perform such work. Cutting off Yairn's stammering, Tijin smoothly introduced himself as her legal advisor. He then asked directly what the issue was. Though Yairn was baffled by his claim, Kang bought the act, convinced Tijin really was her lawyer. Kang explained that Yairn had asked them to appraise a large number of items within a single day. He argued that the workload required at least a week, and bringing in more personnel would raise costs. Therefore, they demanded additional fees. In fact, they wanted double the originally agreed amount. Yairn was shocked, while Tijin immediately realized something didn't add up. If Hyaman was truly a specialized appraisal guild, how could they possibly need a whole week for such a small batch? With a mocking smile, Tijin called them out, questioning how experts could be so inefficient. Laughing, he added that if he were Yairn, he would have taken the work elsewhere long ago. Kang snapped back, asking who Tijin thought he was, daring to speak like that, and warning them about the risks of going to another guild. Tijin countered that there wasn't another guild capable of handling this work anyway. Remaining calm, he stayed silent when Yairn touched his shoulder, asking him to stop. She appreciated his help but didn't want things escalating further. Tijin stood up, admitting he might have overstepped and apologizing if he caused her any trouble. As he turned to leave, Kang mocked him, boasting that Tijin had finally realized no one else could do the appraisal like them. But midway, Tijin stopped, turned back, and grinned. He introduced himself as Yairn's new item appraiser, saying he was excited to work with her in various ways. Everyone stared in disbelief, wondering if the man had lost his mind, especially with that strange monocle perched on his head. Looking over the pile of items to be appraised, Tijin calmly reassured Yairn not to worry. It would take him less than an hour. Yairn was confused while he requested the other evaluators to leave, saying it was all a trade secret. Kang grew furious, calling it a farce. He didn't care whether Tijin was a lawyer or not. If he kept interfering in their business, there would be consequences. Kang mocked him further, saying Tijin wasn't even capable of bluffing properly. His subordinates jeered, pointing out that appraising everything in an hour was impossible. But Tijin ignored them, picking up a necklace and casually asking if he could hold on to it. He explained that he had already appraised it outside earlier, done in under 10 seconds, and asked if that qualified him as an appraiser. Kang was stunned, demanding verification. But Tijin simply grabbed the evaluator's hand and reminded him that bets should only be made if you're certain. He asked if they had never learned that lesson before. He declared he didn't like being treated that way and turned his gaze directly on Kang. He challenged him, saying that if Kang wanted confirmation, then he should also be willing to wager something. Kang chuckled at the audacity, finally understanding where this was headed, and asked if Tijin really wanted to make a bet. He proposed that if Tijin failed to evaluate every item within an hour, he would lose. But if he succeeded, Kang himself would lose and pay a penalty of 1 billion won. Then he asked what Tijin would put on the line. Tijin praised the bold offer, remarking on Kang's nerve. Kang thought he had intimidated him, taunting that Tijin could still back down, admit his mistake, and apologize. But instead, Tijin raised the stakes, confirming the deal and setting the wager at 10 billion won. It was the confidence of someone who already knew the lottery numbers. Yairn was stunned, questioning how on earth Tijin planned to cover such a sum if he lost. Yet Tijin reassured her calmly, asking her to confirm the appraisal once it was complete. His confidence left everyone in shock. Could he really evaluate so many items in under an hour? And yet, with a steady voice, he repeated his request for Yairn to verify his appraisal once it was done. He shows her a cloth, and after running a verification, she realizes the appraisal is indeed finished. It turns out to be an indestructible cloak that can nullify one fatal strike every 48 hours, while also granting +1 to all stats. Stunned, she questions how such a thing is possible, and from her reaction, the protagonist realizes his gamble had paid off. Using the administrator system's item analyzer, he is able to fully evaluate an item's details without even dismantling it. Until now, he wasn't sure if this ability worked for others, but now he has confirmation. Every analysis performed through the item analyzer can be shared with others, which means he could easily amass wealth by acting as an appraiser. Aaron asks if Tijin really did all this, and he calmly confirms, saying no one else could have done it. Furthermore, he had already appraised every single item laid out on the table. He challenges her to verify it herself if she still doesn't believe. Even the nation's best appraisers require hours to extract such data, yet here, everything was revealed in an instant. She can't help but wonder how Li Tijin managed such a feat. Kang is equally shaken, realizing every item has been analyzed, questioning how this could be possible. The protagonist smirks, asking why Kang suddenly looks so unsettled. Then Tijin reminds Kang of his earlier warning, never gamble unless you're absolutely sure and to be more cautious next time. But Kang accuses Tijin of scheming together with Yairn, insisting it's unbelievable. At that moment, Euron steps forward and lays down the facts, saying that lie or not, the truth is clear. The items had all been evaluated. Therefore, by contract, EO owes Tijin 10 billion won. The protagonist casually agrees, telling Kang to just transfer the money over. Kang, still overwhelmed, struggles to accept the reality since he's never faced a situation like this before. Losing 10 billion won over a simple wager feels surreal. His subordinates help escort him out, trying to calm him, while the protagonist and Chai Yairn are left behind. With a mischievous grin, Tijin remarks on how satisfying that bet turned out to be. Yairn thanks him for the help, but admits this is something she cannot simply overlook. She explains that with his speed and precision in evaluation, he alone could overturn the global appraisal industry and monopolize the market. In other words, if he wished, he could destroy the very system guilds like Hyonin depend upon. She admits that even for her, it seems impossible to understand how he accomplished this. Naturally, the protagonist brushes it off as a trade secret, saying he can't reveal anything further. Seizing the moment, he changes the subject, asking if she remembers the relic gauntlets they saw earlier. Since they were listed for sale, he proposes a trade. If she hands him the gauntlets, he'll give her a small hint about his appraisal method. She notes how much he must want that item, but given the situation, agrees to the deal. She even offers to personally retrieve the gauntlets for him right away. However, she firmly demands that he explain how he conducted the evaluation. A short while later, he leaves the place, thanking the director and saying he'll visit again soon, looking forward to their next meeting. The protagonist walks away with arms full of gleaming items, waving goodbye as Yairn watches him leave. Afterward, one of Yairn's bodyguards asks what she managed to find out. She recounts that before leaving, he had told her his so-called secret. He claimed that he listens to the voice of items and advised her to observe them with the eyes of the heart. Naturally, the bodyguard finds this ridiculous, and Yairn herself agrees that Tajin never intended to reveal his true secret. Or perhaps he simply couldn't in this situation. Regardless, she vows that Hunter Tajin must not think she will let this matter end so easily. One way or another, she will make certain he joins her guild. Meanwhile, back at his humble home, the protagonist acts like a madman, exclaiming in triumph that he finally got hold of the cursed gauntlet. With a sly grin, he speaks to the item itself, asking if it knows how much effort it took to obtain and swearing never to let it go. Miri interrupts, pointing out that no matter how legendary the item was in the past, the protagonist admits he has no idea whether it can even be repaired. Still, now that it's in his possession, he is sure he can eventually figure something out. Miri suggests posting about it in the Parsley Market, since countless beings from different dimensions gather there and perhaps someone will know how to restore it. But he cringes, recalling his terrible experiences with that platform, and wonders if he really has to log into that mass-produced mess again. Miri reassures him, saying posting through the status window would be much simpler, and they could even offer a hefty reward for any useful information. Despite the temptation, he decides the broken item isn't his top priority right now. His focus lies on the new items he recently purchased. Thanks to the 10 billion won he swindled from Kang Yangxiak, he indulged in some fascinating shopping, remarking confidently that the Cavalry Guild's initiation ceremony shouldn't pose a problem. However, Miri notices that every item he picked carries holy attributes, questioning why he chose such gear, especially since he was preparing to join a dark magic guild. The protagonist smirks, telling Miri she doesn't know everything. The initiation test will likely involve a necromancy duel against a summoned monster, and holy items would be his best bet. Miri argues that cursed items would be more fitting for a necromantic duel, since wielding holy items could be against the rules. The scene then shifts to the Cavalry Guild, where the guild leader greets the protagonist, saying they had been expecting him. After apologizing for arriving later than planned, he learns that preparations for the duel have already been completed, and that his timing is perfect. Curious, he asks whether any special arrangements have been made. The guild leader confirms, explaining that his initiation trial will be a duel against the guild's vice leader, Zhou Yanti, to test his necromantic skills. Excitement runs high among the guild members, who even prepared a special venue for the match. As the protagonist enters the arena surrounded by guild members, he spots the vice leader waiting in the center. But what catches his eye even more is that everyone present is bald. Even Miri grumbles, complaining about the blinding reflection from their shiny heads. The protagonist quickly realizes this was a deliberate attempt to provoke him. He curses himself for not anticipating it sooner, realizing the guild members were even more troublesome than he imagined. Still puzzled, Miri asks why they are all bald. He explains that necromancers often suffer hair loss due to the Black Mamba attribute. Alarmed, Miri asks if he too will lose his hair, but he avoids answering. Then the vice leader, Zhou Yanti, finally addresses Tajin, asking if he understands the duel's terms. He explains that the battle will be fought exclusively through necromancy, but if he loses, he will be bound to serve the guild for the rest of his life. The protagonist accepts, determined. He firmly believes that Zhou Yanti is the reason the guild has fallen into decline, his parasitic leadership dragging down one of the oldest guilds. With confidence, Tajin adds another condition of his own. If he wins, he will seize Zhou Yanti's position as vice leader and force him to compensate for all the financial damage caused. With a smirk, he remarks that this would also make the duel far more entertaining for the audience. Annoyed, Zhou Yanti denies the accusations, insisting the guild's survival is only thanks to him. To prove his worth, he slams his staff against the ground, summoning an A-rank Death Knight. The crowd watches intently as the skeletal warrior emerges, clad in the holy equipment that Tajin had bought from the market. But instead of admiration, this only provokes laughter. The spectators mock him, asking if he truly believes a lone skeleton could match a Death Knight. Zhou Yanti joins in, declaring that Tajin's preparation is nothing but a joke. Ignoring their ridicule, Tajin commands Aratus to strike. With a single blow, the Death Knight's armor cracks, stunning Zhou Yanti, who never expected such power. The protagonist grins, delighting in his opponent's shock. He asks Aratus how the new equipment feels, and the skeleton admits it is remarkable, though he feels slightly guilty for wielding holy items. The The crowd gasps in disbelief, realizing the skeleton possesses a holy attribute. Some even mutter that such a thing should be impossible. Meanwhile, Tejan internally explains the dynamics of mana attributes. Eridus, originally a dark attribute being, had evolved through consuming magical potions and fighting alongside Tejan, becoming the only skeleton capable of wielding a divine attribute. As the duel reaches its climax, Tejan orders Eridus to unleash the finishing blow. Eridus hesitates, asking if he should use that, and Tejan nods. The skeleton begins chanting, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and void, with darkness over the deep, and the Spirit of God hovering above the waters." Joe Yanti sneers, dismissing the skeleton's sermon as absurd. But just then, Tejan pulls out a light grenade, and as Eridus continues, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' the grenade soars toward the Death Knight. The Death Knight disintegrates instantly, leaving Eridus standing strong at the center of the arena. The protagonist notices that Eridus isn't completely immune to divine power, but the damage he sustained is minimal compared to what it could have been. He demands that Joe Yanti step down as vice leader and repay every bit of what he has consumed from the ancient guild up until now. The crowd is left bewildered. Still, with the outcome undeniable, they begin to see the protagonist as just another dictator like the rest. Joe Yanti, defeated, laments bitterly, saying that if he'd only had more time, he could have completed his grand plans. He told Bai Hyun-soo about the Lichai's relic, instructing him to approach the guild leader while pretending to know nothing. He even went as far as recording the entire conversation. His plan was to use that evidence to blackmail the guild leader and seize total control, but thanks to the protagonist's intervention, everything collapsed. The guild members immediately recognized the relic. It was the heart of Cursed Cain, a forbidden artifact of the highest order. Using his ability, the protagonist inspected it and discovered it was nothing less than a suicide weapon. Accepting that if he lost everything he would not fall alone, the man stepped straight into a portal. Terror spread instantly as the portal burst open, with people screaming and urging everyone to flee. The summoned creature let out a deafening roar, releasing a suffocating aura. Fortunately, the protagonist's system modification shielded him against the ancestor's whale ability. Without hesitation, the monster unleashed a relentless storm of high-rank attacks. Its overwhelming power was beyond comprehension, and suddenly, a man who looked as if he had walked right out of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure appeared behind the protagonist. He offered his assistance without hesitation. This was none other than the Bone King, Lord Gushin, former leader of the Cavalry Guild. When asked when he had arrived, Gushin revealed he had been present the entire time, unwilling to miss an initiation ceremony bearing the guild's name, and in truth he had been enjoying the spectacle. Yet the old man stated there would be time to talk later, for now they had to contain the summoned spirit before the situation spiraled out of control. Even under constant assault, the monster roared and continued to resist fiercely. Gushin, noting its tenacity, remarked that such defiance was expected of a demon brought forth at the cost of a life. The protagonist watched in awe as Gushin unleashed the terrifying might of his legendary blood magic. Known as the necromancer who ruled the world for nearly 20 years after the Great Cataclysm, Gushin's name was infamous. His team had once been celebrated nationwide, and under his leadership the guild had risen to third place in the national rankings. Though retired and largely forgotten, his legacy still carried immense weight. But blood magic carried a terrible price, for it demanded the caster's own blood as its medium. Against a cursed monster capable of infecting with a single touch, the situation was even more perilous, making close combat impossible. Its strikes thundered with such force that the ground itself cracked, and just as it bore down on the protagonist, Eridus suddenly intervened, shielding his master while proclaiming in the name of the light and the Holy Spirit. He declared that such a monster would never be forgiven. The protagonist demanded to know where Eridus had been, furious that he had nearly died, and Eridus explained that he had returned now and would protect his master no matter what. Both the protagonist and Miri noticed Eridus seemed different, with Miri even questioning why his demeanor had changed, but the protagonist had no answers. Eridus then charged the monster, shouting that it would be purified by sacred light. Yet the protagonist quickly realized that even divine power had no effect against this abomination. That left him deeply shaken, wondering how they could possibly defeat such a foe. With a steady voice, Eridus told the protagonist that his journey ended here. He asked only that the protagonist survive, leaving the hero questioning what Eridus intended. The skeletal warrior then drew a strange sword, his resolve unshaken. The protagonist cried out for him to stop, knowing all too well the consequences of using that weapon. It was a one-time use artifact worth a staggering 8 billion. Losing Eridus was unthinkable regardless of the cost. But Eridus pressed forward and completed his attack. The artifact, the Saint's Game, was ranked S-class. As Tijin wept, the old man marveled, calling this skeleton truly extraordinary. Not only did it wield hidden attribute items, but it also brandished a holy sword. When the smoke finally cleared, the system confirmed that the creature had been defeated, though Erida's durability had significantly decreased. Waltasian confronted the skeleton but turned back to apologize to his master. He admitted it was all done purely to protect him. The system then notified that Eridus had entered a petrified state for 24 hours, while Tijin muttered in frustration that he hadn't said anything to him before acting. He reflected on the legendary artifact, the Sacred King's Star Cluster. Despite its severe debuffs, its power exceeded the very logic of this world. The only problem was that recharging it required an astronomical amount of sacred energy. Saddened, he thought he might as well buy a new one, but his partner reminded him there was a reason for its impossible cost. He placed his hand gently on the skeleton, telling him he had done well. At first, he had thought it was nothing but a simple skeleton, but in truth, it was determination itself. And so, from the petrified skeleton, a comet-like tear fell. The old man approached, remarking that the poor skeleton was trapped under a debuff. Meanwhile, Tijin asked if the situation would be all right. Lord Gushin offered to intervene, but Tijin requested only that the summon be released to rest for a time. Gushin nodded with respect, agreeing to the request. He admitted it was his first time witnessing such a sight, a skeleton wielding a sacred artifact. To him, it was as if they had glimpsed the heroes of an ancient age. Yet Tijin looked at it and thought in the end it was still only a skeleton. Lord Gushin, however, expressed his gratitude, acknowledging that regardless of Tijin's intentions, he had managed to break free from Zhou Yanti's grip. He had also thwarted the one who plotted to betray both him and his nephew from within the role of vice guild leader. Looking closely at him, Gushin remarked that Tijin's goals weren't so different from his own. He then asked if anything of value had been left behind in Wuryam. Tijin simply smiled, knowing the old man had likely understood everything from the start, and that the experience itself was invaluable. But deep inside, his only reason for joining the guild had always been self-interest. That was why he only sought the position of vice leader, not leader. He had no intention of robbing anyone of their place. Even so, he acknowledged that the guild had treated him with respect. The old man found that answer satisfying, then turned to the others and called out. He declared that through this duel, Tijin's strength had been undeniably proven. Not only had he defeated Zhou Yanti and the necromancy, but he had also destroyed the evil spirit and saved countless lives. For this reason, he proclaimed that from this day forward, Tijin would be vice leader of the Harian Guild. He then handed the stage to Tijin, urging him to say something to the gathered members. But Tijin, caught off guard, had no idea where to begin his speech. So he simply introduced himself as Tijin, and uttered just one line. "Let's not steal each other's rice bowls." That was his entire speech. Meanwhile, in the Myth Guild, members were watching the news of Tijin's appointment as vice leader. One man stared in disbelief, never imagining Tijin would join that guild. While he respected the choice, he still felt betrayed, and a woman scolded him for carelessly losing such rare talent. He acted melodramatic, saying his sister was being far too harsh. But she grew angrier, insisting she should have recruited Tijin into her own guild, since talents like him were almost impossible to find. On top of that, she couldn't comprehend why he had chosen that particular guild. Remembering that Shauna was close to Tijin, she considered asking her directly. In desperation, she even attempted to bribe the protagonist into joining her guild. When she returned and asked if there weren't alternatives, Cyan responded that while there were, Tijin's true intentions remained unknown. The woman only smiled, while Cyan admitted that sometimes even he didn't know what was going on in Tijin's mind. Despite 10 years of friendship, Kejun remained utterly unpredictable, but there was one thing she was certain of. He always pursued greater strength. And so, cheers erupted everywhere for the new vice leader. A bald man stepped forward, offering to guide him to his new office, leaving Tijin momentarily speechless. After arriving, the bald man bowed politely, wishing him success in his work. But Tijin found himself exhausted by all the formality, wondering if every guild functioned this way. His partner explained that each guild had its own culture. She then asked him directly how he felt on his very first day as vice leader. He admitted it didn't feel great at the moment, and questioned whether this was truly what he wanted. Shaking his head, Tijin murmured that successful people always walked a lonely path. That left him uneasy, questioning whether it was right to gain strength so quickly. Tijin then sought answers from the manager, who explained that the developer behind Dramatic Growth had left the company. She confirmed this fact. He asked if that meant failing a mission carried no penalty, since there had to be some kind of drawback. She admitted she wasn't certain, promising to check the servers. Tijin thought privately that he didn't understand managerial issues at all. From the start, it had always felt odd that he alone possessed a status window that didn't exist on Earth. He had received countless benefits already, but continuing to rely on it blindly was dangerous. Suddenly, the manager rushed in shouting about an emergency. Tijin demanded to know what had happened, and she explained she had received urgent information. As he pressed for details, she began reading directly from the system log. According to the user guide, those who gained dramatic growth would also receive missions. These missions were calculated based on the user's current situation, and if not completed within the time limit, the effects of growth would be nullified. This revelation shocked Tijin, who asked why, since that meant everything he had gained so far could vanish. She confirmed grimly that this was exactly what was written. Like a dragon cornered, he demanded to know why she hadn't told him such vital information earlier. She explained the matter was top secret, beyond her access. All she knew was that it carried the highest priority. Realizing what she had just revealed, she covered her mouth, saying she shouldn't have said that much. Tijin then asked if her real role was simply to monitor his life. Stepping closer, he ordered her not to lie. With sadness, she admitted she could not reveal the truth, not yet. Tijin smirked, joking that in the end she didn't know anything at all. But she countered firmly, declaring she was always on his side. And that wraps up the tale. Did you enjoy this story? Personally, I found it thrilling. Until next time, see you in the next story.